Lord of Mysteries, The Arrival of the New Black Emperor by Huo Yang. Chapter 276-300. Hobert's answer made Benson freeze, and he unconsciously touched his pocket watch. "I'm sorry, I might have made you think of sad things," Hobert said with an apologetic smile. "But only by telling you the truth can you immediately understand why I also invited you to come. Going out for a walk might change your mood." Benson was silent for a long while before saying, He saved Tingen City," Hobert said. "I was right by his side at the time." Benson fell silent again. Hobert then said, "The deceased are gone, the living must live well. Although I've had some issues recently, I still have some connections in Backland. If you need help in Backland, you can write to me or send a telegram." As he spoke, he wrote down the law firm's address. In the future, even if he left Backland, he planned to use Jessica to establish a foothold for himself at the firm. So the recipient Hobert left was Jessica. Benson carefully put away the address, and after a long while, he began to talk about the sights and sounds of Backland with Hobert. As Benson said, both of them were adults. Some emotions and words didn't need to be overtly expressed, it was enough to understand them internally. They first found a place for lunch, then began their trip to Backland. The first stop was Order Square, the large square in front of the order clock. Besides the statue of Protector William I and the tall order clock, it was most famous for its fearless pigeons. After seeing the statue, hearing the bells, and feeding the pigeons, Hobert took them to the second stop, the Ruined Kingdom Museum. It is said that this museum has a history of over 1,000 years, and it houses precious exhibits such as banners and medals from the War of the Oathbreakers. To be honest, these exhibits were not particularly interesting until they entered the colonial era section, which became quite fascinating. The museum contained numerous artifacts and archaeological discoveries from the Rosted Archipelago and East Balam, as well as items representing the customs and traditions of these places. Especially the exhibits from East Balam, with their completely different culture and style from the North Continent, greatly broadened the horizons of Elizabeth and the others. When they left the museum, it was already past 5 in the afternoon. Hobert arranged for their dinner and asked for suggestions. Donna suggested, "Let's go to the Intis restaurant. They say the dining style there is very unique, and we can even taste some dishes invented by Emperor Rosal." Hobert thought to himself, the word, invented, should definitely be in big quotation marks. Donna and Tyrone had long wanted to eat at the Intis restaurant, but Hobert had never had the time to take them. Today, Hobert was generous and took them to the Intis restaurant. This restaurant was considered a mid to high-end establishment in Backland. Its decor was mostly golden, full of exotic charm. Hobert, however, found it a bit vulgar, like a nouveau riche, as if eager for others to know how much gold he possessed. As for the dishes, Hobert was quite satisfied. Although some dishes had clearly been magically modified, a few of Rosal's invented dishes still had a hint of hometown flavor. While everyone was enjoying these exotic dishes, Hobert once again saw the chestnut-haired woman, Bernadette. Today, she wore an olive green long dress, appearing less dignified than their last meeting and more youthful. What a coincidence, meeting her here again. Actually, it wasn't a coincidence. This might be her property, or even if not, her taste should lean more towards the Intis style, so it was normal for her to eat here. Bernadette also noticed Hobert's gaze and looked over at him. Hobert gave her a slight smile. Bernadette seemed to recall where she had seen Hobert before and gave him a polite nod. Just as he was about to continue eating, Hobert suddenly thought that going over to greet Bernadette now wouldn't be so abrupt. Although it might seem like he was trying to pick her up, Bernadette, born in the open Intis Republic, probably wouldn't mind such things. If he said a few words to her now, he could talk more the next time they met. After a few encounters, wouldn't they become familiar? It was then that Hobert realized, did Uncle Hobert, in getting to know a junior, really need to consider so much? But then he felt a bit discouraged. Who made him need Bernadette's help, wanting to borrow her gin? Otherwise, he could completely act like Uncle Joe, and pretend not to know her. Thinking of this, Hobert said to Elizabeth and the others, "I met an acquaintance, I'm going over to say a few words." He picked up his wine glass and walked towards Bernadette, who was almost at the other end of the restaurant. "Beautiful lady, we meet again. It seems the news published in the newspaper isn't entirely accurate," Bernadette said, seemingly unsurprised by Hobert's arrival. "Hobert the lawyer couldn't possibly be involved with those streetwalkers, because your way of picking up ladies is very old-fashioned." Hobert's mouth twitched. He was actually being teased by this young lady. "How do you know who I am?" "I just know," Bernadette said with a mysterious smile. Hobert felt that a few words would suffice. It seems the lady doesn't welcome gentlemen with little experience in picking up women. "In that case, I will take my leave. I wish you a pleasant meal. I'm occasionally quite interested in naive gentlemen," Bernadette said with a smile. "Please, sit down. Let's chat for a bit." Why did he feel like he was being flirted with by this young lady? Nevertheless, Hobert sat down opposite her. "To be honest, your sense of style is quite unique." "Thank you, Hobert. I wasn't complimenting you." Bernadette took a sip of tea. "I know you are someone with some extraordinary powers, and I also have some extraordinary powers. I think there's no need for us to hide this from each other." Hobert nodded, then realized she might have something she wanted to discuss with him. "One of my abilities is to hear some hidden information through certain secret channels or existences," Bernadette said, looking at Hobert. "I've heard that a secret existence named the Creator is awakening." Hobert immediately felt a chill run down his spine. "It's over, I've been exposed." This was the first time Hobert had felt such a strong sense of crisis. In fact, if it weren't for borrowing the djinn, he wouldn't want to have any association with Bernadette. Because Hobert and Rosal were both beyonders of the Black Emperor pathway, an unavoidable conflict was highly likely in the future, and he would probably become enemies with Bernadette as well. But he never expected that his hidden identity would be exposed by Bernadette like this. Bernadette saw Hobert's expression and smiled slightly. "After meeting you last time, I realized that there seemed to be some mysterious association between you and the Creator. Now it seems my prying into an interpretation of your destiny was correct." "Damn it, you scared me." Hobert realized that Bernadette had at most discovered the hidden association between his destiny and the Creator, and it was impossible for her to know that he was the Creator. Hobert's mind raced. He first thought that when he met Bernadette before, they had only brushed past each other. It was impossible for Bernadette to have discovered too much information about him. She must have learned of the Creator's existence through other means. Hobert immediately had a related idea. The hidden sage and the knowledge more most likely knew of the Creator's existence. This went back to when he went to Tingen City to save Old Neil. At that time, the ritual Old Neil was performing was most likely a way for the hidden sage to search for or test the knowledge more. Hobert remembered that the hidden sage seemed to be a mysterious existence formed by the activation of the hermit pathway's uniqueness, and based on Hobert's observations, the knowledge more, unlike other source material, also seemed to possess a certain level of intelligence. Yes, intelligence. Hobert felt this term was very apt, similar to the feeling artificial intelligence gave him. The Creator appeared at Old Neil's ritual and disrupted its progress. The hidden sage should have been able to hear Klein utter the Creator's honorific name. Additionally, the hidden sage had a habit of imparting knowledge to beyonders of the same sequence. Bernadette was already a sequence 3 at this time, and had some ways to avoid the knowledge-chasing people effect, or the knowledge imparted by the hidden sage would likely no longer have much impact on her. Hobert guessed that Bernadette might even have a habit of actively listening, as much of the knowledge imparted by the hidden sage was very cutting-edge occult knowledge. It was possible that Bernadette had inadvertently heard information about the Creator. It was also possible that her source of information came from the knowledge more. Hobert had inadvertently spied on the knowledge more with that eye. Although the knowledge more couldn't trace Hobert in reverse, it should have been able to find many clues, which should include information about the Creator. Afterward, Bernadette learned this news from the knowledge more through a clandestine method. Regardless of which channel Bernadette learned of the creator's existence, the information she knew was extremely limited. Thinking of these things, Hobert's state of mind gradually stabilized. Yes, I do know that hidden existence. This time it was Bernadette's turn to be stunned. She probably hadn't expected Hobert to admit it so openly. Hobert spread his hands, and then, "Are you going to report me to the official Beyonders? Compared to a hidden existence with almost no sense of presence, they should be more interested in you, right?" Mysterious Queen Bernadette. This time it was Bernadette's turn to be slightly surprised. "How do you know who I am?" Hobert said with a smile, "I just know." Bernadette's expression became serious, and she remained silent for a few seconds before saying, "You're overthinking it. I wouldn't be like those scoundrels who run to the official Beyonders to tattle when they're incapable." Hobert thought to himself, "Your Uncle Joe really wants to chat with you about this issue. Bernadette, I just want you to help me say hello to the Creator. Since you know who I am, please convey this. Bernadette sends her regards." The Creator has already received your greetings, Hobert thought to himself. He said, "No problem." Hobert raised his glass, a toast to this thrilling encounter. "I hope there won't be similar experiences in the future." Without waiting for Bernadette's reaction, Hobert drank the wine in his glass, then bowed slightly like a gentleman and got up to leave. Bernadette smiled slightly at Hobert's last words and watched him leave. After leaving Bernadette's dining table, Hobert finally realized, Bernadette wouldn't think that the Creator was her father Rosal resurrected, would she? The more he thought about it, the more he felt this must be the case. Should he pretend to be Rosal and trick the djinn out of Bernadette? Hobert shook his head slightly, rejecting this idea. Bernadette wasn't a 3-year-old child. He'd probably be exposed after a few casual sentences, and then everyone would be very awkward. He could, however, pretend to have amnesia and claim to have forgotten many things from the past to avoid Bernadette's probing. But in that case, Bernadette wouldn't easily give the djinn to the Creator. It's better to make natural contact and wait for another opportunity. Hobert returned to his table, and Donna asked with a giggle, "Hobert, why do you know so many beautiful ladies?" Hobert thought to himself, "Because I'm a sunny and handsome big boy." He casually explained, "Don't overthink it, we're just acquaintances." Donna, "Really? Why did you look so nervous just now?" And then that lady looked very nervous too. The two dining tables were far apart, and Donna couldn't hear Hobert and Bernadette's conversation. Elizabeth and Serena were also very curious, their gossipy hearts evident, while only Melissa wore a polite smile, as if she wasn't very interested in any of this. Hobert told the truth, because we were just exposing each other's shortcomings. Yes, that's right, exposing each other's shortcomings. Originally, he was going to say, her father and I are rivals, but then he thought that Bernadette might hear their conversation, or have a way to know about it, so Hobert simply changed his words. Donna continued to ask, "Why expose each other's shortcomings? Are you rivals?" "You could say that," Hobert said vaguely. "Where were we just now?" "Oh, right, about the smog in Backland. Many gentlemen and ladies are very curious why the weather forecast in the newspapers shows so many sunny days. You know, they barely see the sun all year round. Some even want to go to the suburbs to see the sun, otherwise they'll forget what the sun looks like." This wasn't the first joke about smog at the dinner table, but everyone still smiled knowingly. Benson smiled and said, "Indeed, humor is a compulsory course for every gentleman." Dinner ended in a cheerful atmosphere. Hobert arranged for them to stay at the hotel and borrowed the hotel's small reception room, planning to talk to Elizabeth and Serena privately. Benson, who was beside them, smiled and said, "As the only male on this trip to Tingen City, I cannot let the two ladies out of my sight. Sorry, I don't mean to distrust you, but I must live up to their parents' entrustment. A very responsible big brother, huh?" Hobert wasn't annoyed at all. "It's fine, but I suggest you wait outside the reception room, otherwise Miss Elizabeth's trip will be in vain." Benson was stunned. "Why? Unless you also call me teacher," Hobert smiled slightly. Benson thought of Serena, who was obsessed with the occult, and could only nod, "All right." Hobert asked a waiter to bring a chair for Benson to sit at the door. Closing the reception room door, Hobert first built a spiritual wall, so their conversation wouldn't be heard by Benson. Hobert took out candles and other items from his briefcase while asking Elizabeth, "Are you still having the same nightmares recently?" Elizabeth was a little nervous. Yes, and they seemed to be getting more frequent. Serena, on the other hand, stared at Hobert without blinking, as if carefully noting every step before her. Hobert lit the candle, opened the Amanda hydrosol, and dripped a few drops onto the burning candle. The air immediately filled with a tranquil, peaceful scent, and Elizabeth and Serena fell into a hazy state. Hobert once again used the psychological spoon to hypnosis Elizabeth, making her forget everything about the crow-feathered golden-horned evil creature. With the assistance of Amanda, such hypnosis was almost as reliable as that of a Beander from the spectator pathway. Snap! Hobert snapped his fingers, extinguishing the candle. Elizabeth and Serena woke up at the same time. Serena exclaimed, "That was great, the feeling just now was amazing. This is what mysticism is all about." Hobert smiled and asked Elizabeth, "Do you still remember the nightmare you had?" Elizabeth paused for 2 or 3 seconds. It's amazing. I still remember having a nightmare, but I can't recall any of its content." Hobert nodded. "You shouldn't have similar nightmares in the future." Serena looked adoring. "It's amazing. Teacher, will I be able to learn such a skill in the future?" "It's not impossible," Hobert smiled. Serena then asked, "Teacher, can you make Melissa forget her sadness over her brother's death?" "That's not the same thing," Hobert replied. "Elizabeth's nightmare originated from some psychological shadows. If those shadows aren't removed, they will affect her physical and mental health. However, Melissa's sadness for her brother precisely shows her love for him. Such emotions should not be forgotten, nor should they be interfered with. You must not have similar thoughts again." Serena nodded repeatedly. "I understand, teacher." Hobert then said, "Miss Elizabeth, I'd like to speak with Serena alone." Elizabeth stood up and nodded. "Okay." When the door closed again, Serena seemed to have forgotten Hobert's not-so-strict reprimand from earlier. She looked at Hobert excitedly. "Teacher, was that hypnosis just now? Does it require any incantations or potions?" "No," Hobert explained, "the essence of mysticism is not in incantations or potions, but in ability." Ability. Serena's expression was as if she had discovered a new continent. "Our conversation from now on, you must not tell anyone, not even your parents or classmates. Because if you reveal these secrets, you are very likely to be captured by the church and interrogated about the source of these conversations, and your family and friends will also be implicated." Not only was Serena not afraid, she was even genuinely happy. She nodded repeatedly. "I swear, I will not reveal it to others." Hobert hummed. "Beander truly exist. They possess various extraordinary abilities, and they form an extraordinary world beneath the surface world." Hobert briefly explained some basic knowledge about Beander and the extraordinary world to Serena, which thrilled her and made her exclaim that only today did she truly understand what mysticism was. Finally, Serena asked, "Teacher, can I also become a Beander in the future?" "That is what I am about to warn you about," Hobert said. "The extraordinary world has a fascinating magical charm, but it is also very dangerous and very dark. Losing control or turning into a monster, these are common occurrences. Getting injured in an extraordinary battle, or dying in battle, these are also common occurrences. So, if you want to become a Beander, you must completely bid farewell to your family, and completely bid farewell to everything from before. Because if you continue to live with them, you might, without knowing when, bring danger to their side, and they will also become your burden and weakness. Can you do that?" Serena hesitated. Although she was deeply fascinated by mysticism, the idea of completely leaving her family for it was difficult for her to accept at once. "No need to rush your decision," Hobert smiled. "You can write to me often in the future, and I will answer some of your questions about the extraordinary world. Also, you can't have called me, teacher, so many times today for nothing." As Hobert spoke, he unhooked the key ring from his waist, put away the wax seal and pocket watch key. This key ring is for you, a gift from a teacher to a student. Thank you, teacher. Serena's smile returned. She, of course, understood that Hobert meant he was willing to be her mysticism teacher. She stroked the key ring, not feeling the coldness of metal at all, but rather a slight warmth. This key ring. Hobert smiled. That's right, it's a little trinket with an extraordinary effect. If you carry it with you, most wraiths will try to stay away from you. Serena quickly put it away and thanked him again. Thank you, teacher. After finishing Elizabeth's hypnosis and his conversation with Serena, Hobert bid them farewell and took Donna and Tyrone home. The next morning, after breakfast, Hobert, Donna, and Tyrone went to the hotel again to take them to visit the Russell Memorial Exhibition. Hobert still greeted the Mechanical Heart members he knew, and this time, the Mechanical Heart members didn't even report it upwards. It had already been clarified during the previous meeting that Hobert's suspicion had been ruled out. During the visit, Hobert, without surprise, saw Klein, who was in disguise. Hobert had guessed long ago that although he kept saying he wouldn't, he would still come to take a look. Around noon, to catch their train, the group didn't have time to go to a restaurant for lunch. Hobert bought them simple meals and thoughtfully bought small gifts for their families. Around 12 o'clock, Hobert watched Elizabeth and the others board the train. Elizabeth had resolved the issues she encountered and no longer had the apprehension and concerns she had when she first got off the train. Serena was clearly a bit reluctant to leave. She still wanted to find an opportunity to ask more questions about mysticism. Melissa also showed some changes. Her smile looked a bit more genuine, no longer just a polite smile. The only one who remained unchanged was Benson. A single travel could hardly heal the deep-seated pain in his heart. Watching the train depart, Hobert then took Donna and Tyrone to lunch. Donna and Tyrone had been without their parents' restraints for the past 2 days and had a blast. Now that they were going home, they were a bit reluctant. In the carriage on the way back, Donna asked, Hobert, are you really not coming with us on the travel? Mother said this travel will be over 3 months long. Will we not see each other for a long time? Hobert smiled. I'm learning a magic spell these days. Even if we're thousands of miles apart, I can appear by your side very quickly. Donna pouted. Braggart. Hobert patted Donna's head. When you grow up, you really aren't cute at all. Donna dodged Hobert's hand and stuck out her tongue at him. Amidst their chatter and laughter, they arrived at Queen's Avenue. When Hobert saw the mercenary club, he suddenly remembered that he still had time to attend a gathering. Hobert hurried to the underground theater, just in time for the Beander gathering to begin. He had no particular goal in coming this time, just wanted to pass the afternoon. The gathering still started with team formation. The mercenary team that was previously looking for a treasure belonging to a certain Beander family came to form a team again. Through the clues we found, we learned the approximate location of an ancient tomb, but after searching for a long time, we still haven't found it. We now need friends who are good at divination or good at finding ancient tombs to join our team. The speaker was a big fat man, dressed in casual clothes, and Hobert was worried that the buttons on his belly would pop open from his paunch. The fat man continued, as long as the ancient tomb is found and the subsequent exploration is completed, he can get a 10% share of the spoils. When Jacob formed a team to explore the ruins before, Hobert's strength was insufficient, so he didn't plan to get involved. Now a sequence 6 Beander, Hobert was very interested in this kind of ruin exploration, and he asked, what type of ancient tomb is it? What's the danger level? When the fat man came to form a team last time, Hobert had intended to ask, but at that time, the ruins Jacob and his team were excavating had just given Hobert a considerable psychological shock, so he didn't ask. Later, under the protection of Mr. Azek, Hobert gained a lot from Trensus's ruins, making him even more interested in extraordinary ruins. The fat man said, if you are interested, we can talk in private in the reception room after the gathering. Specific information is not convenient to disclose. Hobert nodded. I understand. He planned to inquire first, and if it didn't conflict with Christine's plan, he would go and see the site. After the Fat Man's team invitation ended, the team that had explored the newly discovered uninhabited island at the previous gathering also happened to invite new teammates. What we didn't expect was that on that small island, we actually discovered some extraordinary creatures and some strange buildings. According to our preliminary judgment, those buildings have a fourth epic style, but for some reason, they were abandoned before they were even completed. In addition, there seems to be a powerful, strange extraordinary creature on the island, and our multiple attempts to capture it have all failed. Because of the appearance of a group of pirates, we had to temporarily retreat and come back to find more helpers to thoroughly investigate that small island and strike at those pirates. Friends of the Hunter pathway can consider joining us. Specific gains will be distributed according to contribution, and with the Mercenary Club's guarantee, you don't have to worry about our credibility. Perhaps because it involved going to the Raging Sea, no one responded to this team invitation. The subsequent team invitations failed to interest Hobert, and in the trading session, there were no items that attracted Hobert's attention. After the gathering, Hobert went to the reception room the Fat Man mentioned. Including Hobert, a total of 5 people wanted to accept the Fat Man's team invitation. However, the Fat Man only needed 2 people now, so he turned around to interview the 5 individuals. The Fat Man glanced at everyone, then said to Hobert, "Young man, let's talk first." Apparently, he didn't often attend the Mercenary Club's Beander gatherings and didn't recognize Hobert. After sitting down in the reception room, the Fat Man said, "I must warn you, our expedition could cost you your life at any time. You'd best reconsider whether you want to continue our conversation." Only then did Hobert realize that the Fat Man saw him as too young and possibly inexperienced, which was why he called him in first, intending to dissuade him. Hobert smiled. "I have experience exploring extraordinary ruins. If your sequence is too low, it's also very dangerous. Sequence 6. The Fat Man looked Hobert up and down. "All right, we can proceed with the conversation. Are you good at divination?" "I have a sealed artifact that makes it easy to encounter ancient tombs," Hobert said. "I also know a friend who is good at divination. What kind of cooperation method do you prefer?" The Fat Man paused for a second or two, clearly re-evaluating Hobert's strength. "Congratulations, you'll be a member of our team for a while." "Wait," Hobert smiled slightly, "I need to assess the risks of this exploration first before deciding whether to join you. Please answer the question I asked at the gathering: what type of ancient tomb is it? Or rather, which pathway's Beander is buried there?" The Fat Man no longer concealed. "It is said that the Grave Keeper is a descendant of Antigonus, and according to the clues we found, his tomb may contain some of the Antigonus family's accumulated wealth." Hobert immediately had the idea of refusing. Although there was no evidence, he always felt that an ancient tomb of a Beander from this pathway was likely a trap. The reason was simple: Beanders of this pathway and adjacent pathways were generally cunning schemers. The Fat Man probably saw Hobert's concerns. The danger level of the ancient tomb should not be high. After all, according to reliable records, the Grave Keeper was a sequence 5 when he died. Is the information reliable? We wouldn't joke with our own lives. Hobert nodded. In that case, he could consider it. If it were sequence 3 or higher, that ancient tomb might be part of the Grave Keeper's advancement ritual. He said, "If I discover danger, I will warn you. But if you don't listen, I have the right to leave directly, and you cannot stop me." The Fat Man said, "That's only natural." Hobert then added, "As for dividing the spoils, I have priority in choosing." The Fat Man thought for a moment before saying, "You can only choose once." Hobert nodded. "Deal." At this point, the Fat Man introduced himself. "You can call me Austin. Our new round of exploration departs next Thursday morning. We'll gather at Order Square." Hobert nodded. "No problem." As he left the reception room, Hobert realized that this would be his first time actively participating in a Mercenary Club mission. A new week began, and Hobert took a taxi from his home on Queens Avenue to work at the law firm. Upon arriving at the office, Viscount Glaine's personal valet came to see Hobert. In his briefcase were several potions Hobert had previously ordered from Viscount Glaine. Viscount Glaint provided a bill. The corpse-dissolving water and poison Hobert needed were naturally free, and Jessica's ordered potions totaled £26. Jessica came to pay, and after the valet left, she smiled. I didn't expect it to really be at cost price. This was much cheaper than potions at other gatherings, but she wondered about their effectiveness. Afternoon passed, and Hobert, as usual, returned to Blanca Street on some pretext. At exactly 3 o'clock, Hobert's vision was covered by grey fog. When he arrived in the Giants' Hall, he immediately noticed a new member opposite him. Miss Magician was online. Justice, Audrey did not greet all the members as usual. Through observing the new member's attire, posture, and height, primarily height, she determined that the new member was Miss Furs, not Miss Hugh. She was overjoyed. This was a new member who had joined through her recommendation. "The fool," Klein said, "this is our new member, Miss Magician." Everyone greeted the new member. Klein then introduced, "Magician, Furs, this is Miss Justice, that is Mr. Hanged Man and Mr. Emperor, Mr. Sun, and Mr. World, who is seated at the lower end." Furs politely greeted each of them, while also observing the other members' states. Miss Justice was wearing ruined noble attire, so she was likely a noble from Backland. Mr. Hanged Man looked a bit rough. The Sun didn't seem very old, and why did the World look so sinister? And why did Mr. Emperor give her a familiar feeling? Furs, with her rich experience in extraordinary gatherings, appeared very steady, not as green as the Sun when he first joined the Tarot Club. Amidst everyone's mutual observation, Klein announced that the gathering had officially begun. Since no member provided Rosal's diary this week, after the gathering began, the Hanged Man, Alger asked, "Mr. Emperor, I'm very curious, do you really plan to use that sealed artifact often?" "No, I don't," Hobert replied. "I've already crushed it into extraordinary characteristics and plan to find an artisan skilled in making magical items to recreate a magical item with less severe negative effects." This was not something worth hiding. Klein behind the grey fog and Alger almost simultaneously thought, as expected. Furs instantly broke down, her steady mindset turning into an urge to scratch her head. What are they talking about? Why do I seem to understand, but not grasp their meaning? At this moment, she even doubted the knowledge she had accumulated from participating in gatherings over the years. Audrey asked curiously, "Such an operation is possible?" Hobert smiled. "Yes, do you remember the laws of extraordinary characteristics we talked about before? This is an application of those laws." Laws. Furs noticed this word, but why would the modern term, laws, be used in mysticism? Audrey pondered for a moment, and by applying the conservation of extraordinary characteristics, she roughly understood the principle behind this operation. Alger interjected, "I heard that at least a grade 0 sealed artifact is needed to crush extraordinary characteristics." The Sun, Derek also echoed, "Maybe our terminology is different, but I also heard that divine-level sealed artifacts can do this, and it's said that only some intelligent divine-level sealed artifacts can." Hobert affirmed, "That's right." Alger, Derek, and a few others exchanged glances. "All right, now it's clear. Emperor, indeed has the opportunity to use a grade 0 sealed artifact. With such strength, the family behind, Emperor, must be an ancient Beander family." Furs weakly raised her hand. The grade 0 sealed artifact everyone is talking about, is it the grade 0 sealed artifact concept given by the Church?" Audrey smiled. "Of course, in the extraordinary world, there's only one standard." Furs was stunned for a second or two before muttering, "It's said that those are things that can destroy a country." Her heart felt as if a fierce wind was blowing and heavy rain was falling. "I heard the concept of a grade 0 sealed artifact at a previous gathering, and I thought it was a legend or a story. Who knew? What kind of gathering have I joined? There's actually a member who can use a grade 0 sealed artifact. And why is everyone's reaction so calm?" Audrey then asked with some curiosity, "Compared to that, I'm more interested in knowing the final transaction price of that sealed artifact containing the traveler's extraordinary characteristic." Alger glanced at Emperor, and, seeing that he had no intention of stopping him, said, 9,200 pounds. Audrey sighed, Mr. Emperor, you are truly wealthy. She had previously taken out 10,000 pounds at once, which took some effort, so she naturally knew how difficult it was to raise funds of that magnitude. Furs almost slid under the long table. The highest transaction amount at the gatherings she had previously attended was only 1,000 pounds. In fact, transactions of a few £100 were usually conducted in secret, otherwise, they would easily be targeted by some ill-intentioned beyonders. 9,200 pounds. She thought of her over 1,000 pounds in savings, which she had been proud of before attending the gathering, and suddenly felt so pitiful. And, why? Why was everyone's reaction so calm? Hobert sighed, the money I saved during this period has been completely emptied. Alger joked, perhaps we should ask you to give us a lecture on how to earn 10,000 pounds in 1 or 2 months. Then he added, Mr. Emperor, I remember you mentioned before that you know why the raging sea is raging, right? Furs even had the urge to bite her nails. What does, why the raging sea is raging, mean? Hasn't it always been raging? If it's not raging, what would it be called? Yes, Hobert said. I remember I also said that this information is probably worth 2,000 pounds. This price is only available at the Tarot Club. At other Beyonder gatherings, I don't think you could get such high-level intelligence even at several times the price. Another point is that I will only sell such information at the Tarot Club. If I sold such high-level information in the real world, it would certainly bring me a lot of trouble. Alger nodded. According to your hint, I inquired about some information. At the end of the 4th epoch, the Underworld Emperor, who failed in his attack on the North Continent, was severely wounded under the siege of the 6 gods. After he escaped from the battlefield, he stirred up raging winds and waves, creating an insurmountable obstacle that blocked his enemies. From then on, the sea between the continents became unpredictable, turning into the raging sea, where shipwrecks frequently occur. I also learned about some legends of the South Continent. It seems the Underworld Emperor failed to return to the South Continent. Could the formation of the raging sea be related to his demise? That's right, roughly so, Hobert smiled. But your conjecture only describes the superficial phenomenon of the raging sea's formation. Its intrinsic cause and principle are a very high-level extraordinary knowledge, and far more complex than you imagine. What? Do you want to trade information about the formation of the raging sea? Alger hesitated for a moment before saying, yes, the second target I am looking for is in the unexplored areas of the raging sea. Then he asked, how can I avoid the severe weather of the raging sea? Hobert thought for a moment. As far as I know, there is one way. Alger subconsciously asked, what way? Hobert smiled, you will only understand the method I'm talking about if you understand the principle of the raging sea's formation. Of course, you can also just buy the method from me, and I will also provide you with the corresponding tools. I think 500 is a very suitable price. Alger finally made up his mind. I will trade with you for the reason behind the raging sea's formation. He felt a bit pained. 2,000 pounds, right. One cannot be careless with the preparations before exploration. I believe I can offer a discount on this transaction. Keep your money for now, it will be useful later, Hobert said. If one person trades with me, the reward is 2,000 pounds. For 2 people, it only costs 1,000 pounds. If 3 people want to know the answer to this question, each only needs to pay 700 pounds. If 4 people want to trade with me, it only costs 600 pounds. Furs opened her mouth, there was such a big discount. But she quickly realized, no, Mr. Emperor hasn't earned a single penny less. On the contrary, he's earning more and more. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And please support the author by link in description. From the beginning of the gathering until now, Furs had been in a state of confusion, her inner world already in turmoil. Why are the transactions here so high-end? Oh my goodness, the Underworld Emperor. That's an ancient figure I read about in history books. Judging by their tone, the Underworld Emperor was also a high-level Beander. No, Hanged Man used he and fallen. Could it be that the Underworld Emperor was an existence like a god? But what does this have to do with the raging sea? Also, Emperor's way of trading is really novel. Not only can he earn more money this way, but he also gives buyers a good deal. Such high-level intelligence costs only £600 or £700. It makes me want to join their transactions too. But first thought that she only had a little over £1,000 in savings, and she still needed to buy the astrologer potion formula and main ingredients in the future. Reason told her that her money couldn't be spent in such a place. At that moment, she dared not say a word, nor even breathe heavily, listening obediently to the other members' transactions. Audrey was the first to raise her hand and say, "I want to join this transaction." The son, Derek, also said, "I also hope to join. Can the payment still be made with extraordinary materials?" "Yes." Hobert smiled and said, "Only 3 people, right? Then each person needs to pay £700. The son needs at least 3 main ingredients of sequence 8. Alger breathed a sigh of relief, once again thanking Emperor for inventing this transaction method. To learn such high-end information for £700 was truly too cost-effective. After everyone had no objections to the payment for this transaction, Hobert said to Klein, "The fool, please seal magicians, and the world's hearing and vision." Although it felt a bit like burying one's head in the sand, the world still had to be included. Klein slowly nodded, letting the mist envelop the world and furs. Hobert then began. The information Hanged Man inquired about is a widely circulated legend. The characters appearing in this legend are correct, and Hanged Man's guess is also very reasonable. But has everyone considered this question? Which god represents the power over the ocean? Alger did not speak, while Audrey responded, "Of course, it's Storm of Lord." That's right, if the Underworld Emperor stirred up raging waves and created a stronghold on the sea, why didn't Storm of Lord calm the rage of the sea? This caused the North-South continent to be separated for over 1,000 years. Hobert asked with a smile. Klein, who was freeloading behind the gray fog, sighed. He was really afraid that Emperor would be struck by lightning when he went out. He knew too much and had no respect for gods at all. Alger thought of the answer, but because it was too blasphemous, he still did not speak. Audrey, on the other hand, simply hadn't thought of the answer, like a student encountering a difficult problem in class, deep in thought. Derek, not quite understanding the authority of Storm of Lord, also didn't know how to answer Emperor's question. Hobert answered his own question. Apparently, it's because Storm of Lord also couldn't calm the rage of the sea. Alger breathed a sigh of relief, as expected. Audrey was somewhat unable to maintain her spectator state, but then she calmed down again. She had just heard information about the blasphemy slate last week, and she already had some antibodies to this type of blasphemous information. This is one of the most valuable parts of this intelligence, Hobert continued with a smile. The fall of the Underworld Emperor caused the entire space of the raging sea to undergo distortion. Because of the special nature of his pathway, the underworld and the spirit world, which overlapped with the real world, collapsed and merged due to the distortion of space. The reason the climate there is so violent is because of the underworld and the spirit world. The knowledgeable Klein and Alger immediately understood many things. Alger smiled and said, "No wonder the climate of the raging sea has remained unchanged for over 1,000 years." Audrey, however, asked, "Is there a difference between the underworld and the spirit world?" This was not very valuable information, so Hobert casually explained, "The underworld is a special area opened up by ancient death god in the spirit world. For beyonders of the death god pathway, they can borrow power from the underworld more conveniently than from the spirit world. At the same time, that is also death god's domain in the spirit world, a part of his undead empire." Audrey smiled and said, "Thank you for your generosity." Derek immediately asked, "Emperor, is the ancient death god you mentioned the undying bird Gregare?" "Yes. So, the underworld emperor was the death god who once existed in your world?" "Yes." Hobert said, "Not just the death god, he was also trying to open up a new path. Whether it was Klein behind the gray fog or the seasoned veteran, Alger, both keenly noticed a new path. Unfortunately, Hobert did not continue to discuss this topic, but returned to the issue of the raging sea. Why could the fall of the Underworld Emperor cause such great power? Hobert answered his own question. Because when the Underworld Emperor joined forces with Original Witch to attack the North Continent, his state was distorted, he was half mad. Klein suddenly remembered a sentence from Rosel's diary: the Underworld Emperor went mad, but also became stronger. Alger frowned, not quite understanding what it meant. The Underworld Emperor didn't forcefully jump to non-adjacent pathways like Blood Emperor, so why was he also half mad? Audrey directly asked, Emperor, I'm sorry, but I have a new question. Why was the Underworld Emperor's state half mad? Hobert replied with a smile, that's another question, and it'll cost extra. Audrey sighed helplessly. Her financial situation had not been very optimistic in recent months, and £700 was already her current limit. Hobert returned to the previous topic. Because of the special nature of the Underworld Emperor's state, the two uniquenesses that fell from him were not sealed and properly handled in time. This was the root cause of the Raging Sea's initial fury. It was those two uniquenesses that reacted violently with the power released when the Underworld Emperor fell, breaking the balance between the real world, the spirit world, and the underworld, causing the entire Raging Sea to distort, and the power of the underworld and the spirit world to continuously affect the real world. Even Storm of Lord couldn't change the impact on reality. This is the reason and principle behind why the Raging Sea is so raging. The atmosphere in the Giants' Hall had become solemn. Emperor's words just now contained too much important information. Alger asked, Emperor, what is uniqueness? Hobert smiled. This is the second valuable point of this intelligence. A true God is unique. His foundation is the unique one is the uniqueness of that pathway. You can understand it as the authority of a God, the abstract source of a God's power. Justice, the hanged man, and the sun exchanged glances, each seeing surprise in the other's body language. If Klein wasn't for the clown's excellent self-control, he would have shown enough surprise. Truly, if the Emperor said he was struck by lightning one day, I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest. Audrey sighed inwardly. The Tarot Club should just rename itself the Offending Deities Gathering. Why do we have to offend or blaspheme a deity every time we meet? Alger, on the other hand, thought to himself, so deities are not only of high status, but they also have their unique aspects. Their authority is actually visible. Derek felt his brain couldn't keep up. Mr. Emperor's words just now were essentially analyzing the source of a deity's power. If such statements were spread in Silver City, he would surely be burned alive. No wonder he said he wouldn't conduct such transactions outside the Tarot Club. Hobert smiled. I remember the treasure legend of Death's Key, circulating on the sea. The description of this legend is quite apt. The place where the Underworld Emperor fell indeed holds the key to becoming a death, and that key is the uniqueness of the death pathway. Alger noticed a detail problem. Mr. Emperor, you just said the Underworld Emperor had two uniquenesses on him. Besides the uniqueness of the death pathway, what pathway was the other uniqueness from? And how could the Underworld Emperor, how could he absorb, accommodate the uniquenesses of two pathways? Klein almost applauded Alger. This was also something he didn't understand. That's another question. Hobert laughed. It'll cost extra, and the value of that question is higher than the one I just answered for you. Alger gave a bitter smile. Let's make that transaction another time, when there's an opportunity. Klein, however, sighed inwardly. The Emperor is a business genius. These money-making pieces of information are linked one after another. Audrey felt like she was reading a brilliant novel, but just when it reached the most exciting part, the author suddenly stopped writing. It was truly hateful, infuriating, and there was nothing she could do about it. Derek was still processing the information about uniqueness. Alger quickly asked again, then what can I do to avoid the bad weather in the Raging Sea? Although the principle was known, there seemed to be no solution to the problem. That was a consequence caused by the authority of a true deity. What could a Sequence 7 do to solve it? Of course, by traveling through the spirit world. Hobert had long thought of this loophole. The solution to the problem is a free gift. Although the spirit world in the Raging Sea area is also very distorted and chaotic, compared to the real world, the spirit world is simply a smooth road. Once the magical item with the Traveler Extraordinary characteristic is ready, I can rent it to you, or we can simply team up to explore that ruin. Alger breathed a sigh of relief. I'll consider it and get back to you. Audrey smiled slightly. As expected, there's no problem Mr. Emperor can't solve. With the transaction regarding the Raging Sea concluded, Klein restored Furz's hearing and vision. She immediately felt the atmosphere of the gathering become much more solemn, which made her even more curious about the transaction that had just taken place. Hobert then said to Alger, I want to initiate 2 transactions with you. Alger was startled. Please speak. The first transaction is, I heard that an island was recently discovered in the Raging Sea, and some extraordinary animals and some uncompleted ruins were found on the island. Have you heard about this? I have. Alger said. I heard many pirates went to the island to explore. Do you want to go and see it too? Hobert smiled. With the travel ability, I can go to many places in a short time, but before that, I need to understand the relevant intelligence about that small island. Alger pondered for a moment. 150 pounds, I'll tell you everything I know. Hobert nodded. Deal. These 150 pounds can be deducted from the payment of the previous transaction. Alger, of course, had no objections. Do you wish to hear it alone, or for everyone to hear it together? Let everyone hear it together. Hobert smiled. There's no need to keep this information secret. Moreover, even if the other members heard it, it would be impossible for them to go explore that island. Alger obviously knew the location of that island, but if he wanted to go, he would have gone long ago. Klein, Audrey, and Furz will not be leaving Backland anytime soon, and the little son is even less likely to become a competitor in exploring unknown islands. If he could go, Silver City would have been freed long ago. As for the world, if he could go to that island alone, then Hobert would not dare to participate in the Tarot Club again in the future. Alger organized his words and said, that small island was discovered 3 months ago, at the end of the western route, southwest of Sarah Island. Its location is on the edge of the safe passage, so it was only recently discovered by a ship hiding from a storm. That was a ruined kingdom ship, and the captain sold this intelligence for a good price. It is said that a ruined mercenary group has been exploring that small island for a long time. In the past month, pirates have gradually received the news and begun their exploration. As far as I know, the Merlin pirate crew and the Black Whale pirate crew have successively arrived at that island. The former is a pirate crew that has been active at sea for more than 10 years, while the latter is rumored to have pledged allegiance to King of the Five Seas Nast Solomon. It is said that iceberg vice-admirals, Golden Dream, also appeared near that island. The other pirate crews are not worth mentioning. As for what specific extraordinary creatures are on the island, there is currently no definite news, but it is said that there are extraordinary creatures at the Sequence 6 level. Hobert was very satisfied with this intelligence. Only at sea could such comprehensive news be obtained. Once he had the travel ability, Hobert planned to join in the fun. Audrey and Furz, on the other hand, had already begun to fantasize about adventurous life at sea. One imagined exploring with Susie and fighting pirates to uphold justice on the island. The other imagined encountering a handsome and humorous gentleman during the adventure, and the two of them embarked on an adventure together, ultimately obtaining hidden treasure. Then he said, the second transaction is, I found the Wind Blessed's potion formula for you. Even the mature and steady Alger was a little excited. This is truly good news. Name your price. Hobert. Base price, 1,500 pounds. Audrey across from him smiled slightly. Just a few days ago, she had heard the term, base price, several times. But immediately, a surprising thought appeared in her mind. Thank you all for your monthly votes. Although not as fierce as at the beginning of the month, the author still receives a lot of monthly votes every day. Nothing else, just an extra chapter as a token of my appreciation, *degree*. Audrey suddenly realized that she had previously been so engrossed in the satisfaction of seeing through the Emperor's identity that she hadn't considered how much more conspicuous she was. First, my attire and accent would easily allow Hobert to determine that I am a noble from Backland. The key is that after attending so many gatherings, I have never adjusted my voice. If it's just based on my voice, Hobert could easily link justice with Audrey. Audrey finally concluded. Hobert probably knew that justice was Audrey all along. But thankfully, I also know that the Emperor is Hobert. We're even. With that thought, Audrey let out a long sigh of relief and decided to maintain the status quo for now, only revealing her identity when an opportunity or need arose. On the other side, Alger breathed a sigh of relief and, almost immediately after Hobert made his offer, said, "Deal." At sequence 6, both potion formulas and main ingredients would have significant markups, and the price offered by the Emperor was fair. Furs heard that the two were trading what sounded like a sequence 6 potion formula, and she finally felt a bit more grounded. Although she had attended so many Beander gatherings, she had never encountered anyone trading a sequence 6 potion formula, because formulas of this level rarely appeared and had terrifyingly high markups. But compared to their trade on the formation principles of the Raging Sea, this was already much closer to everyday life. With the help of the Fool, Hobert materialized the wind-blessed potion formula and handed it to Alger. Alger glanced at the formula, wind-blessed. Main ingredients: 6 crystallized feathers from a blue shadow falcon, a pair of dragon eye sea eagle eyeballs. Auxiliary ingredients. Then he said to everyone, "Please help me keep an eye out for dragon eye sea eagle eyeballs." Alger knew there was a mysterious island where blue shadow falcons resided, and he could look for an opportunity to hunt one. After everyone agreed to help Alger keep an eye out, the son Derek said again, "Mr. Emperor, before attending the gathering, I had already prepared the materials to repay my previous debt. Since I've incurred new debts, could I give you 4 sequence 8 main ingredients and 1 sequence 9 main ingredient altogether tomorrow?" His merits were still enough to exchange for 3 sequence 8 extraordinary materials from the inventory. Hobert nodded. "You may. By the way, if possible, it would be best if those 4 sequence 8 main ingredients were the same material." This was to leave some room for Kelly's trial and error. No problem. For Derek, Silver City had many identical materials in its inventory, and the Emperor's request was not difficult to fulfill. Furs hesitated for a moment, but still reminded him, "Mr. Son, if you don't have gold pounds, you can exchange for some Ruined Kingdom gold pounds at a bank to pay Mr. Emperor." She spoke rather tactfully. 3 sequence 8 main ingredients already far exceeded the value of 700 gold pounds. The reason she reminded him this way was because she assumed the son was not from the Ruined Kingdom, and that was why he was paying in this manner, lacking gold pounds. The value of extraordinary materials is generally more stable than gold. Even if the currency used to purchase the materials differs, the specific value will not vary too much. If people from other countries exchange for gold pounds at a bank, even with transaction fees, it is still relatively cost-effective. Derek was slightly taken aback. "Thank you for the reminder. The city I am in cannot exchange for gold pounds." He added, "The price Mr. Emperor offered was actually very considerate of me." Derek was telling the truth. After he had figured out some of the price difference for extraordinary materials between Silver City and the outside world, the Emperor was still willing to value 3 extraordinary materials at 700 gold pounds, which was clearly a discount for him. In his opinion, the Emperor was so intelligent, and even proposed a trade of weapons for extraordinary materials, so he must have also understood the price difference. What Derek deeply regretted was that his merits were insufficient. Otherwise, he would have been more willing to trade 5 or even 6 sequence 8 main ingredients with the Emperor. Hearing the son's words, Furs was stunned. Is this really considerate? Or is he being sarcastic? He doesn't look like it. Also, if the city he is in can't exchange for gold pounds, he could go to a larger city, couldn't he? Surely a capital city would have banks with foreign exchange services. Audrey smiled. Miss Magician, your reminder is a very noble gesture, but if you knew the region Mr. Sun is from, you wouldn't have made such a reminder. Furs guessed. So that's it. The Sun might be in the South Continent, where transportation is inconvenient, making it even more difficult to exchange for gold pounds. Hearing Justice's words, Derek yearned even more for life in the North-South Continent, so he initiated a trade he had long wanted to propose. I would like to trade information about the 7 gods you speak of with all of you. In return, I can answer some of your questions, provided I know the answers. He said, everyone can write down what they know about the 7 gods, and then I will answer your questions one by one. Is anyone willing to trade with me? Furs thought she had misheard. In any corner of the world, one could learn about the 7 gods by simply finding a village church, couldn't they? Why trade for it? Also, why was everyone's reaction still so calm? Audrey, Alger, and the world were all willing to trade with Derek. Hobert smiled. I won't participate. The information I know, you might not be able to give an equivalent answer for. Klein and Derek both felt it was a pity. Klein felt that the intelligence Hobert provided might be valuable even to those familiar with the 7 gods. Derek, on the other hand, felt that the information provided by the Emperor would likely be the most comprehensive and trustworthy. After this trade, the world then conducted a trade with Derek regarding Beyonders of the Demon Pathway, to further confirm the identity of the serial killer. Subsequently, the trading session ended, and the discussion session began. Hobert asked, does anyone know the progress of the Backland serial murder case? Alger, beside him, asked, are you not in Backland? No, I've been busy with other things, Hobert explained. If I hadn't just heard the trade between Mr. World and the Sun, I would have almost forgotten that there's a demon in Backland seeking an opportunity to advance. Furs, who is also in Backland, listened with particular attention. What does that mean? The killer is a Beyander, specifically of the demon pathway they just mentioned. Oh my goodness, I never imagined such an evil pathway existed. The world said in a hoarse voice, the official Beyonders are investigating with all their might, and they should be close to identifying the killer. Audrey said, I hope they can catch the killer as soon as possible. Furs echoed, the atmosphere in Backland has become very oppressive because of the serial murder case. Hobert moved on to the next topic. In the Ruined Kingdom, there is a Beyander organization called the Judgment Group. It is a terrorist organization supported by another country. Members in the Ruined Kingdom should be vigilant against this organization. If you accidentally learn any news about them, please notify me by praying to the Fool, and I will share a certain amount of spoils with him. On the raging sea, the Blue Avenger sailed steadily through the storm, amidst crashing waves. In the captain's cabin, the unsecured tables and cabinets slowly shifted with the rocking of the ship. Alger, sitting in his chair, could also feel the gentle swaying of the ship, but he had long grown accustomed to such rocking. If he were to return to land, he would initially find it disorienting. Alger first paid the Emperor 50 pounds through a sacrificial ritual, covering the cost of the wind-blessed potion formula and the information about the origin of the raging sea. Then, he recalled the Emperor's words and fell into deep thought. Although I didn't ask, the Emperor must already be Sequence 6 now. After becoming Sequence 6, he has become more proactive, even preparing to hunt members of some extraordinary organizations. Once he gains the ability of travel, no one will be able to easily kill him, and a metropolis like Backland will no longer be able to trap him. He will likely come to the sea to explore that small island and stir up a bloody storm. After killing people, he can simply leave and return to Backland to continue being a gentleman. As he pondered, Alger also coveted the ability of travel. He believed he could use this ability to create several different identities at sea, thereby making himself mysterious and unpredictable, which would be the safest approach. Unfortunately, it was too expensive. Alger shook his head. The traveler extraordinary characteristic was not something he could afford right now. Then he began to consider, should I invite the Emperor to explore the second target found in the ruins with me? If I invite the Emperor to explore together, this operation will undoubtedly be very secure, but I will definitely have to share the spoils with the Emperor, and most likely, the Emperor will get to choose first. What if I explore alone and encounter a similar situation to last time? Alger still felt some lingering fear when he recalled his previous exploration experience. Fortunately, he was cautious enough at the time, otherwise, it would have been easier for the sea god to kill him than to crush an ant. After much deliberation, Alger decided to search the surrounding waters again to see if there were any safer routes. If he truly couldn't find a safe route, he would then invite the Emperor to explore with him. As for the Emperor's proposal to rent his sealed artifact, Alger felt that if he couldn't find the target, even if he had the ability of travel, this exploration would only be slightly more convenient, but not necessarily much safer. It would be better to simply ask the Emperor to act, which would be more secure. Backland, Queen's District, inside Count Hall's villa. Audrey first paid Hobert the £700 through a sacrificial ritual. Then she recalled Hobert's words, spoils of war. Hobert directly regarded the members of the terrorist organization as spoils of war. She remembered that Hobert had not been so flamboyant before. Is it because his confidence has inflated after becoming Sequence 6? Also, I inquired, Brigadier General Christine has no siblings, though he has many comrades, but they all seem to have been deliberately assigned to various military districts. In everyone's eyes, he is just an ordinary brigadier general, but surprisingly, Brigadier General Christine actually possesses a Grade 0 sealed artifact. Perhaps Hobert has other channels to obtain the right to use a Grade 0 sealed artifact. Audrey had also met Brigadier General Christine, and he didn't look like someone in charge of a Grade 0 sealed artifact. Although she didn't have a very clear concept of a Grade 0 sealed artifact, she knew that if Christine were in charge of a Grade 0 sealed artifact, he definitely wouldn't just be a brigadier general. It's so contradictory, Audrey thought to herself. If I can meet Brigadier General Christine at a ball, I can try to talk to him and see if I can get more information. Just then, Susie ran in from outside to report, "Thank goodness, Audrey, you're finally awake. Annie is back from your mother's and has already reached the corner of the corridor." "That's great, Susie." Audrey smiled, opened a drawer, and rewarded Susie with a few pet biscuits. Forsaken land of the gods, Silver City. Derek, just like after the previous few gatherings, stared blankly at the dim ceiling for a while. Then he turned over, got out of bed, tidied his clothes, and went out. He had been very busy recently. The merits he earned, besides paying off Mr. Emperor's debt, also needed to be exchanged for the main ingredients of the Light Seeker potion. His work in the workshop was equivalent to constantly role-playing a singer, and the potion was basically digested. After the gathering, besides continuing to work in the workshop, he also had to help Mr. Emperor exchange for 3 identical main ingredients. Derek thought, I can go to the black market first to see. If I can't exchange for them there, then I'll go to Silver City's warehouse, or exchange for 2 in the black market and 1 in the warehouse. Otherwise, continuously exchanging for 3 materials that seem useless in everyone's eyes might attract some attention. Backland, 15 Minsk Street. Klein looked at the weather outside. It was a rare clear day, clear enough to even see the outline of the sun. Sequence 6. Klein, who had just become Sequence 7, imagined what kind of abilities he would gain upon becoming Sequence 6. He did not immediately seek the Emperor's help at today's gathering to shatter that extraordinary characteristic contaminated by the true creator. Anyway, he wasn't in a hurry to use it right now, so he could completely wait for some time. Today, after the Tarot Club, Klein planned to go to the Harvest Church. He had heard at Old Gentleman Wisdom Eye's gathering that he could obtain the pharmacist potion formula there. Klein wanted to cultivate a pharmacist assistant, or sell the formula when he was short on money. Putting on his top hat and taking his cane, Klein waited on the street for a while, took a hansom cab to Rose Street, and then walked for 7 or 8 minutes before finding the Harvest Church, which looked a bit out of place on that street. Entering the church, Klein first marveled internally at Bishop Utravsky's height, then said, I heard that one can obtain the pharmacist potion formula here. Yes, Bishop Utravsky stopped his prayer. But the prerequisite is to complete a mission. What mission? Kill my past self, Utravsky explained. I have a sealed artifact here that can enter the depths of dreams, and my past self is hidden there. But I must warn you, I am a Dawn Knight. To be honest, my past self is quite strong, and your strength does not seem sufficient to defeat my past self. Klein was very interested in Utravsky's sealed artifact. As long as I can know the abilities of a Dawn Knight in advance, it's not impossible. Utravsky suddenly asked, do you know Hobert? Klein was startled and immediately became more vigilant. Yes, I do. Utravsky nodded imperceptibly. It seems you are the one the Mother Goddess arranged to save me. If you succeed, I will not only give you the pharmacist potion formula but also a sealed artifact. All right, now I will explain the abilities of a Dawn Knight to you. Just now, Klein was surprised why the giant bishop knew he knew Hobert. He even thought this giant bishop had a grudge against Hobert. But why, after learning that he knew Hobert, did the giant bishop become much more amiable, even so amiable that it made him feel a little uneasy? Klein's heart was in turmoil. Why, just because I know Hobert, did I become the one, arranged by the Mother Goddess, to save him? At 192 Blanca Street, Backland. Furs, in her bedroom, took half a minute to collect herself. What a wonderful gathering. Immediately after, the incredible things from the gathering surged over her like a tide. Mr. Emperor has a channel to use sealed artifacts. Why were the Sun's words so strange? He doesn't seem to live on the North-South continent or the islands. Where exactly is he? The serial murders, were they actually committed by a devil? Questions in Furz's mind sprouted endlessly like bamboo shoots in spring. The pressure from that gathering was simply too strong. During the final communication segment, she didn't even dare to ask the questions on her mind. Then she thought again. So, the raging sea wasn't raging before. Its current raging state is related to the underworld emperor in the history books. What should I do? I really want to know the answer. I wonder if, the next time I trade with Mr. Emperor, paying him 600 gold pounds would be enough for him to tell me the answer. Thinking this, she sighed, lamenting why her life was so poor. Logically, over 1,000 gold pounds in savings should have been enough for her to live a middle-class life in Backland, but at this moment, those savings seemed so pale and powerless. No, I can't procrastinate any longer. I must write the beginning of the new book as soon as possible. Once the beginning is written, the rest will be easy to write. After much effort, she finally sat up from the bed. I need to take it easy. Getting up too quickly isn't good for the body. Of course, I should also use this time to relax. For example, how about reading a magazine or newspaper for a while? In another bedroom on the second floor, Hobert received the remuneration from Alger and Audrey through a bestow method, totaling 2,750 gold pounds. This included 1,500 gold pounds for the wind-blessed potion formula and 1,250 gold pounds for information on the cause of the raging sea's formation. With this income, Hobert's funds exceeded 6,000 gold pounds, making him a rich man again. He felt that this money could entirely serve as startup capital for developing in the South Continent. As for the gold and extraordinary characteristic from the country of disorder, he could keep them. In case he went to a place where gold pounds were not used, both gold and extraordinary characteristic were hard currencies. Even if gold pounds were used, he could use travel to return and cash them in at extraordinary gatherings in Backland, though he would need to find new channels for cashing them in. Thinking of this, Hobert offered the recently acquired 2,600 gold pounds to the country of disorder. Seeing the pile of gold pounds become full again, Hobert's mood immediately improved significantly. Just as he was about to leave the country of disorder, Hobert noticed two stars twinkling in the pool before him. One of them was Raft praying to the Creator again. Hobert sighed, remarking on the man's perseverance. The other star was Upton. Hobert extended his spirituality and heard Upton's voice. Great, the Creator, I have returned to Connaught and am preparing to open a steam engine showroom here. If any of your blessed ones need my help, they can come find me. The showroom's address is 66 White Rose Street. Withdrawing his spirituality, Hobert nodded. Very good. He even knows to proactively report his movements now. Now, not only did the Creator have a blessed one in the South Continent, but also in Dissy County. This was cause for celebration. He finally had two blessed ones. Hobert chuckled self-deprecatingly. Then he thought, that Dawn Knight who called himself John had hidden the mutated fire rose spider in the cemetery in Connaught. Should he have Upton go take a look? But he quickly shook his head. The risk of this action was not small, and Upton still had many uses in the future. If he were targeted by the Judgment Group, it would not be worth it. As he pondered, Hobert looked at the star representing Raft. This isn't my fault, he brought it upon himself. Although I used him to obtain the Black Emperor card, I also dispelled the evil spirit possessing him, which means I saved his life. We are even. But he insisted on coming back to let me trick him. What could I do? However, Hobert did not act immediately. He decided to wait and see. If Raft prayed to the Creator again, then the Creator should not be blamed for using him as a pawn again. Leaving the country of disorder, Hobert thought of Furs, who had just joined the Tarot Club. I can't continue living with Zio and Furs, it would harm them. After a moment's thought, Hobert put on his coat, picked up his cane, and went to a restaurant outside to order a lavish dinner, and bought 2 bottles of wine. Around 5 in the afternoon, Furs, who was about to come down to make dinner, and Zio, who had just returned home after a busy day, were both surprised to see the lavish dinner Hobert had prepared. Furs smiled. That 10 gold pounds for dinner hasn't been used up yet. Zio, on the other hand, laughed. We'll just pretend you're treating us to dinner because you made money. At the previous Justice League gathering, Hobert had sold 2 potion formulas and 1 sequence 8 main ingredient, earning over 1,000 gold pounds. Hobert arranged the wine glasses. I have something important to discuss with you too. As he spoke, he opened the red wine. Please sit. Furs and Zio exchanged glances, their expressions becoming serious. Hobert smiled. There's no need to be so serious, but I must tell you this in advance. To seek better development, I might have to leave Backland at any time, so I want to ask you to be prepared to look for a new rental place, because before leaving Backland, I will terminate the lease and get back a portion of the rent. Of course, he wouldn't tell them the truth. Zio looked at Hobert. Did you get into some trouble? No, Hobert smiled. It's truly for better development. Although Backland has various convenient extraordinary channels, it's not suitable for my continued development. This is determined by the potion. Furs nodded, half understanding. Will you ever come back to Backland after this? Of course, I'll come back, Hobert said, and I'll come back often for some transactions. As long as I can be notified in advance, I will attend every Justice League gathering without fail. The only question was, how to get timely notifications. Zio looked a bit dejected. I've already gotten used to the lively restaurants and spacious bedrooms here. I've gotten used to it too. Hobert forced a smile, but a banquet always ends. Don't be sad now, because the next banquet will always come. Furs raised her glass. All right, I wish you better development. Zio and I both owe you a favor, and can only repay it later. That's too formal, Hobert smiled. If you need to find me, you can write to the law firm, and my colleagues will forward it to me. The next day, Tuesday, Hobert was woken up early by the Fool. It turned out that Little Sun had gathered all the extraordinary characteristics and paid Mr. Emperor using the Fool's sacrifice. There were 4 main materials of sequence 8 level and 1 main material of sequence 9 level. Hobert didn't recognize them, so he simply sacrificed them all to the country of disorder. In the afternoon, Hobert accompanied Christine to see off her adoptive mother Monlisa, as well as Donna and Tyrone. Monlisa's expression was calm, as if she had been prepared for a long time. Donna's emotions were very rich, with both a longing for travel and reluctance to part with her father and Hobert. Tyrone's reluctance outweighed his longing, and he wiped away tears several times, his eyes red. Watching the train depart, Christine and Hobert each took a carriage home. As she got into the carriage, Christine said to Hobert, "Move back in a few days." Hobert agreed. He returned to Blanca Street with mixed feelings, seeing the empty armchair, as if the entire house had become desolate. Furs and Zio's previous rental apartment had not been unsubscribed. They had moved out to avoid Keelinger's, but now Keelinger's grave grass was very tall, so they could just move back. Hobert sat on the sofa, poured a glass of wine, and slowly drank it. The successive partings made him feel quite down. He wasn't in the mood to cook dinner himself, so he went to the nearby Dixie-style restaurant. After eating and drinking his fill, he returned to his bedroom and entered the country of disorder. Now, only gold pounds and those lovely magical items and extraordinary characteristics could soothe his soul. Sitting on the Iron Throne, he glanced at the stacks of gold pounds. Hobert then saw the star representing Raft expanding again. He thought to himself, since that's the case, you can't blame me. Extending his spirituality to the star representing Raft, Raft's prayer was similar to usual, all asking for the Creator's gaze, asking the Creator to guide him on the path to restoring his family's glory. Hobert used true sight to confirm again that there was no one watching within at least a dozen meters, and Raft's state was also very normal. He pondered for a moment before projecting his power and image onto the star. To seek my gaze, you must pay a price. Backland, Civilis Street, Queens District, number 29. During this time, to avoid missing the gaze of that mysterious existence and to avoid leaving a bad impression on that mysterious existence, Raft had been holed up at home. He hadn't even gone to the casino, nor had he invited street girls over. This evening, he was somewhat disheartened, drinking red wine, feeling like his recent prayers were like a fool's performance. Perhaps that honorific name wouldn't lead to any existence at all, or perhaps that mysterious existence would never reply to his prayers. Even if there was a reply, there was a high possibility that he would lose control and turn into an irrational monster. As Raft was lost in thought, he saw a majestic figure, as if sitting amidst sharp swords, and heard an incredibly solemn voice, "To seek my gaze, you must pay a price." Splash! The wine glass fell to the floor. Raft felt an unprecedented sense of oppression, with excitement and fear intertwined in his heart. It took him a full 2 seconds to react. He immediately lowered his head and knelt on one knee. "Respected great existence, please forgive my rudeness just now. What price must I pay to continue receiving your gaze? I have already served you once at the Russell Memorial Exhibition. Please accept the service of your humble servant, Lafite Pound. Please help your humble servant guide the way to restore my family's glory." The majestic voice did not reply, which made Raft's heart uneasy. But soon, a scene appeared in Raft's mind. He was running on the streets of Backland, and under the glow of the gas streetlights, he vaguely saw a phantom figure clinging to his back. Raft gasped. He had already recalled that this was exactly the scene when he returned after excavating the ruins of his family's property, that illusory figure. "Oh no, I've been possessed by an underground evil spirit." Fortunately, another scene then appeared in his mind. It was himself at a gambling table. The illusory figure was still there and had become even more solid. Suddenly, the shadow seemed to see something terrifying. A mysterious power pulled the shadow off Raft's body and crushed it. Then Raft found himself acting as if possessed, going to the Russell Memorial Exhibition. The second scene ended, and Raft regained his thoughts. He immediately recalled that for a period of time, he always felt easily fatigued, and no amount of rest helped. The two scenes shown to him by that mysterious existence made him understand the truth. When excavating the tunnel, I was possessed by an underground evil spirit. It was that mysterious existence who eliminated the evil spirit, but the price I paid was being controlled by the mysterious existence for a period of time and performing actions against my will at the Russell Memorial Exhibition. However, new doubts arose in his heart. "Respected great existence, thank you for saving me from the darkness of being killed by an evil spirit. Please forgive my rashness. It turns out I was not serving you then, but paying a price. But I have a question, why did you notice that I was possessed by an evil spirit?" Theoretically speaking, this powerful existence should not pay attention to a low-sequence Beander. Only that solemn voice said, because of your bloodline. Raft was stunned. The Pound family's bloodline. No, no, no. To avoid royal jealousy, the Pound family, even at its most glorious, only had 2 sequence 5 Beyonders. This great existence must be referring to the bloodline of Blood Emperor Tudor. It is very likely that this existence is a major figure from the 4th epoch, perhaps even present in the 4 Emperors' War that swept across the North-South continent. He immediately thought, since I haven't immediately turned into a monster or a madman, then this great existence might be a powerful figure from the Blood Emperor's faction. Even if not, he holds no ill will towards the Blood Emperor and the Tudor family. Raft asked in the most respectful tone, what kind of price must I pay to frequently receive your gaze and guidance? Prove your reliability and loyalty. Raft immediately knelt on both knees. Please accept my serve. I don't need this kind of knight-like loyalty. Then you. Just then, 2 more scenes appeared in Raft's mind. The first scene was a road sign, Connaught Boston Cemetery. The second scene was a tombstone engraved with the name, John. That solemn voice said, I'll give you a small task to prove your reliability. There's a small trinket in the coffin, sacrifice it to me. Raft quickly said, thank you for your mercy. The immense pressure disappeared. If it weren't for the wine glass on the floor and the spilled red wine, Raft would have felt as if he had dreamt it all. He knelt on the ground, muttering, that grave, that coffin, in Connaught City. Should I go? He had a premonition that this, small, task might not be so simple. As Raft thought, he stood up. Only then did he realize that he was drenched in sweat. At this moment, a hint of madness flashed in Raft's eyes. This is an opportunity, I must seize it. Even if there's danger, my situation can't get any worse than it is now. In the country of disorder, Hobert withdrew his spirituality. Now it depends on whether Raft is willing to go. As long as he is willing to go and pledges his unwavering loyalty to the Creator, Hobert could conveniently offer him some help in the future. After admiring the gold pounds, an extraordinary characteristic on the stone platform not far away, Hobert left the country of disorder and returned to the real world to rest. On Wednesday morning, Hobert first directed the servants sent by Christine to move. Actually, there wasn't much to move, just some clothes and daily necessities. In fact, Hobert had no intention of canceling his lease. Sacrificing to or bestowing upon himself in the country of disorder still required him to come here, and participating in the tarot club also needed an undisturbed space. Around 10 o'clock, Hobert arrived at the law firm for work. His assistant, Jessica, immediately brought him an official document, which turned out to be an invitation from the Parliament. Hobert opened it and saw that the Parliament had recently established a labor compensation law team and invited Hobert to join it. Jessica was happy for Hobert. This is good news. It shows that our work is gaining the attention of the Ruined Kingdom's Parliament. That was the Parliament. In Ruin, a constitutional monarchy, theoretically, the law was greater than royal power. And the Parliament held legislative power, making it the undisputed highest authority. It was just that no one would actually use the law to punish direct members of the royal family. The king had only lost legislative power. Governing power was still in the hands of the royal family. After all, the prime minister was appointed by the king. Although the prime minister would not consult the king on the daily operations of the country, if the king wanted to intervene in a matter, no law could restrict his power. Hobert, however, smiled and said, the upper house of parliament mostly consists of hereditary seats for nobles, while the members of the lower house are major bankers and the kingdom's top wealthiest individuals. They have indeed noticed our work, but their focus is probably not what you imagine. Jessica was stunned. Aren't they preparing to protect the rights of workers? Hobert, however, asked, since our team was established, how many workers have we helped to claim workers' compensation? So far, we have handled 28 cases. Thanks to your good start, claiming workers' compensation is becoming smoother and smoother now. Hobert nodded. According to the relevant laws of the Ruined Kingdom, Cases where there are no clear and applicable laws or regulations in the law are judged by referring to previous cases. Because there were no relevant regulations specifying concrete labor compensation standards, before Bob's case, there was only a customary standard. After Bob's case, the judge began to use Bob's case as a reference, so in these 28 cases, we have basically won. Such a trend is unacceptable to the wealthy. It's better to quickly legislate and set a standard for workers' compensation. As long as there are relevant laws and regulations, they will have loopholes to exploit again, and the wealthy who can afford lawyers will once again take the initiative in the compensation process. Jessica opened her mouth. They are too evil. Even more evil than devils. Hobert smiled. Devils only appear occasionally, but the devils catalyzed by wealth can openly harm others and even become models and examples for the era. Although they invited me, it's probably just for show. They'll only let me observe, but they won't adopt any of my opinions. Jessica sat on the chair opposite Hobert, feeling a sense of powerlessness, a unique feeling in Backland and this era, which she often had before. Then, will you still go? Of course I'll go. Hobert smiled. We are Backland's last hope. How can we not strive for it? Let me see, the first meeting starts next Monday. Go write a letter to the reporter who interviewed us before. Tell them that the issue of labor compensation is going to be legislated, and come with me to the meeting next Monday. Jessica's eyes lit up. I understand. I'll go write the letter now. Hobert smiled slightly and began to deal with the work at hand. But after a short while, Jessica came in again. Hobert, a butler has come to visit. This is his master's business card. Jessica handed over the business card very solemnly. Hobert took it and saw that it was the business card of Ambassador Tim of Fenaport. I haven't had any dealings with him before. Hobert's expression was somewhat puzzled, but he had already thought of the two groups of people he had driven away earlier who were tailing him. One of them was very likely sent by Tim. Hobert had thought the matter was over, but he didn't expect Tim to send a butler again. Please let him in, Hobert said. Since the other party was visiting openly, he wasn't afraid they would plot against him. The butler was a man in his 50s, dressed very appropriately and meticulously, with his hair neatly combed. Hobert, hello. My master wishes to invite you to the Fenaport embassy. He wants to consult you on some matters. Hobert stood opposite the butler. Are you mistaken? I am not proficient in international law, nor am I very familiar with the laws and regulations of the Fenaport kingdom. Why would the ambassador think of consulting me? Of course not mistaken. The butler smiled somewhat stiffly. Ambassador Tim indeed invited you to go. Hobert joked. Could it be that your country hasn't paid the ambassador, and he's asking me to help him claim his salary? I am good at cases like that. The butler maintained his smile, said nothing, and did not react to Hobert's joke. Hobert gave an awkward laugh. All right, I'll go with you. As he spoke, he picked up his cane, gave Jessica a few instructions, and then left in the embassy's carriage. Because the other party had formally invited him, Hobert was not worried that the Fenaport ambassador would plot against him. Even if they were to make a move at the embassy, he was confident enough to escape the encirclement of the military attachés. Taking the carriage, they arrived at the Fenaport embassy in the West District. The butler asked Hobert to wait in the reception room. While the butler went to inform Ambassador Tim, Hobert admired the decor, which was rich in the style of the Fenaport kingdom. The decoration style of this kingdom still followed the principles of exaggeration and asymmetry. This style formed during the Solomon era, and the main decorative elements included bats, roses, and crows, giving it a somewhat eerie feel, a distinct difference from Ruin's decoration style, which favored lotuses and azaleas. Just then, Ambassador Tim, with his toothbrush mustache, pushed the door open. He had a friendly smile on his face. Hobert, hello. Thank you for accepting my invitation. Hobert stepped forward, about to shake hands with Tim, when he suddenly felt a burning sensation from the psychological spoon. He thought to himself, the ambassador's invitation was indeed not that simple. Chapter 287, Ambassador Tim's interrogation in Fenaport. The psychological spoon on Hobert had a passive skill that could block mental attacks, and after each block, the psychological spoon would heat up. Hobert had also done research. Blocking a sequence 7 level mental attack would only make the psychological spoon slightly warm, while a sequence 6 attack would make it scorching hot. Hobert couldn't simulate a sequence 5 mental attack, so he didn't know the exact reaction, but based on this increasing response, facing a sequence 5 mental attack would likely make the psychological spoon very hot. At the demigod level, the psychological spoon might not be able to block mental attacks anymore. Upon seeing Ambassador Tim, the psychological spoon was scorching hot, indicating a sequence 6 level mental attack. Hobert couldn't immediately determine if Ambassador Tim was a Beyander of the spectator pathway or if he possessed a magical item from that pathway. He immediately feigned a somewhat dazed state. Ambassador Tim, hello, I'm sorry, I suddenly feel a bit unwell. He didn't pretend to be immediately affected by Ambassador Tim's hypnosis because Beyonders of the lawyer pathway could not only resist spiritual attacks but also had some resistance to mental attacks. Hobert's disguise was perfect. Ambassador Tim asked with a gentle smile, "Are you a barbarian or a briber?" Hobert's expression seemed to be resisting something, but his mouth still spoke the truth, "A briber." Ambassador Tim nodded. This was consistent with the intelligence he had gathered. No one would have expected Hobert to become a sequence 6 so quickly. "No wonder," Ambassador Tim said. "You will completely forget your current discomfort later. All right, please have a seat." Through the reaction of the psychological spoon, Hobert knew that the opponent's mental attack was ongoing. His resistance had lasted long enough, so he gradually relaxed his expression, his eyes became vacant, and he sat down as Ambassador Tim instructed. Ambassador Tim then said, "Drink tea." Hobert picked up the teacup and began to drink, emptying all the tea in the cup without putting it down. Ambassador Tim nodded with satisfaction, put down the teacup. Hobert, with a blank gaze, put down the teacup, secretly admiring his own acting skills. Seeing that the hypnosis was effective, Ambassador Tim began to ask, "What clues did you obtain from the 2 Spiritual Cultivation Society cadres who were killed by your team earlier?" The Spiritual Cultivation Society was a cult organization founded by a vice leader of the Judgment Group. Its headquarters had previously been captured by a mercenary team, and 2 cadres had escaped to Backland. Military Intelligence Section 9 learned of this intelligence, but after deploying informants to search without success, they posted a mission at the mercenary club. Hobert, in turn, entrusted this mission to Hugh. Under Hugh's planning, they killed the 2 cultists in a textile factory dormitory. There was another deceased person at the time. Through psychometry, Hobert learned that the deceased was actually a spy sent by Ambassador Tim. It was also through that psychometry that Hobert learned that the Fenaport Kingdom had been supporting the actions of the Spiritual Cultivation Society. Later, when Hobert helped Kelly escape the Judgment Group's recruitment and gave the Judgment Group's intelligence to Military Intelligence Section 9, he was able to connect all the clues with some information provided by Byron. Hobert replied, "They must have accomplices in Backland, otherwise, they couldn't have hidden so well." He felt a bit strange internally. This mustachioed Ambassador Tim was overly cautious. They were just 2 pawns. Was it really necessary to take such a big risk to bring him in for questioning? "Ambassador Tim, why didn't you follow up on that clue? We were only interested in the bounty for those 2 cultists, there was no need to investigate further." "Where did you receive the mission?" "The Mercenary Club." Ambassador Tim nodded. All of this aligned with his conjectures and investigations. Then he asked, "Did you kill Bowden?" Hobert showed genuine confusion. "Who is Bowden?" Ambassador Tim took out a prepared portrait, which was precisely that of the Dawn Knight who called himself John. Hobert's mind raced. No wonder he took the risk to bring me here. So, he suspects that I killed those 4 members of the Judgment Group. Your suspicion is correct, but your investigative methods aren't very good. Then he thought, where did the mistake occur? Or was he followed by Ambassador Tim's eyes at the time, leading him to suspect me? Hobert carefully replied, I've seen him. Ambassador Tim immediately followed up, where did you see him? A wild artisan's workshop. Ambassador Tim pondered for a moment, then asked again, did you kill Bowden? Hobert thought to himself, it seems he's not sure if I killed those people. So he replied, no. On Tuesday evening last week, did you accompany your assistant to negotiate with Bowden and his group? Yes, but when we arrived at the agreed location, we didn't see them, we only found some traces of a struggle. Hobert felt a little uneasy. This answer was a bit risky, but it was the best he could think of in an instant. Ambassador Tim's expression was clearly puzzled. What else did you find? There seemed to be some water on the ground. Hobert breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed Ambassador Tim didn't know much. Ambassador Tim asked again, did you tell anyone else about this negotiation? No. Hobert spoke the truth. Did you prepare to find other helpers to kill Bowden and the others? No. This was also the truth, as Hobert alone was enough. Ambassador Tim pondered for a while before saying, all right, our conversation is over. You will completely forget our conversation just now. When I count to 3, you will wake up by yourself. 1, 2, 3. Hobert seemed to suddenly come to his senses, his eyes regaining their sparkle. Then he smiled and said, I'm sorry, Ambassador Tim, I seem to have zoned out just now. It's all right. Ambassador Tim smiled and said, I called you here today to consult you on a few legal questions. About half an hour later, Ambassador Tim personally saw Hobert off from the embassy. Watching the carriage leave, Ambassador Tim's genial smile gradually faded. It seems we've been looking in the wrong direction. Do you still think he's suspicious? The butler, who was following Ambassador Tim, replied, from my observation, his reactions were very normal. I only found traces of Hobert and his assistant outside the scene. And from the windows at the scene, it appears no fewer than 2 people successfully escaped, but they were still caught or ambushed, which means the other party had already set a trap and had numerous people, which doesn't seem like an operation Hobert and his group could have carried out. There must be an organization behind them. Hobert said no, but it's possible that relevant memories were erased. He suggested, we could track Hobert and his assistant for a while, we're sure to find new clues. No, Ambassador Tim said. This is Backland. Our tracking would be exposed to Military Intelligence Section 9's view. Calling Hobert to the embassy this time was already very risky. He turned around and walked back into the building, saying, moreover, we have a bigger plan recently, one involving Hobert. Don't let 4 insignificant people ruin our plan. The butler followed closely. I understand. I will inform the judgment group that we have taken significant risks to conduct a series of investigations and can rule out Hobert and his group as suspects. After all, he is only a sequence 7, it's impossible for him to silently eliminate Bowden and the others. Didn't Gale say he left a trap? Let them continue to investigate. Ambassador Tim nodded almost imperceptibly. On the carriage ride back, Hobert remained tense until he got off the embassy carriage and returned to his office, where he finally let out a long sigh. Hobert calmed down, and after some deliberation and speculation, the details of the matter gradually became clear to him. It must have been during the negotiations between the Dawn Knight and Kelly that Tim or someone from the Judgment Group tracked Jessica. But they didn't track them to the negotiation site in the suburbs, perhaps because tracking at night in the suburbs could easily lead to being discovered, or for other reasons. They didn't know the exact movements of Hobert and the others, nor could they confirm if they were the killers. No, that's not right. Hobert realized that if that were the case, they would definitely, rather believe it than not, and should have already launched retaliatory actions. Hobert thought that he was wearing a wax seal made of an order crystal at the time, so they couldn't find the killer through extraordinary means. The intelligence they had must have been very little, and Tim had no way of determining the killer. Perhaps the only clue they had was that Hobert was also involved, and this clue must have been confirmed based on later investigations and information obtained from the Judgment Group. Following this clue, they could, of course, find out that Hobert and Jessica left together in a carriage on Tuesday night. Although Hobert and the other two were the biggest suspects after the disappearance of the 4 Judgment Group members, an artisan who was not good at combat, a Sequence 7, and a Sequence 9 could not possibly have silently eliminated Bowden and the others. It could be confirmed from some of Tim's questions that they did not believe Hobert and the others were the killers. Therefore, Hobert and the other two would instead be used as bait to draw out the big fish behind the scenes. After today's interrogation, Hobert believed that Tim should continue to observe and would only take new action after finding new clues. Hobert decided to find an opportunity to wear a mask and use his travel ability to counterattack, creating an alibi for himself and completely clearing his name. Thinking of this, Hobert frowned. If that were the case, Jessica and Kelly should be in some danger now. Kelly had moved, so she might not be found so easily by the Judgment Group, but Jessica had been working normally during this period, so the Judgment Group could easily find Jessica. He was about to call Jessica over to give her a few instructions, but before his raised hand touched the bell's pull cord, he suddenly thought, Tim won't harm Jessica and Kelly. If Tim captures Jessica or Kelly, it would almost be showing his hand. Military Intelligence Section 9, knowing that the Fenaport ambassador suddenly captured a wild Beander, would definitely investigate, and this investigation would easily lead to the Judgment Group. The Rune royal family, of course, wouldn't care about the life or death of a low-sequence wild Beander, but they would definitely use this to extort a large sum from the Fenaport kingdom. If Tim has a brain, he wouldn't do this, but we still need to prevent Jessica and Kelly from being found by the Judgment Group. Thinking of this, Hobert still pulled the bell's pull cord. This kind of bell design was very popular in Backlund's offices and homes. The supervisor had a rope here. As long as he pulled this rope, the bell on the assistant's or secretary's side would ring. The assistant would know that the supervisor needed them and would immediately go to the supervisor's office. In the home version of the bell, the rope end was in the master's room, and the bell was in the servant's room. Because electricity had not yet been widely used, electric bells had not yet appeared. About 10 seconds later, Jessica appeared at the door. Hobert tilted his head and then pointed to the opposite side of the desk. Sit. Jessica understood Hobert's meaning, closed the door, and then sat opposite Hobert. For a while, be wary of retaliation from the Judgment Group. If necessary, take some time off. I will communicate with Barton Lawyer, and you can return to work normally in 2 or 3 months. Jessica was startled. Did you get any news? Sort of, Hobert said. That Dawn Knight is, after all, a key member of the Judgment Group, so they will definitely investigate. And we had agreed to negotiate with the Judgment Group, and then something happened to the Judgment Group's people, so you and Kelly are, of course, the biggest suspects. At the time of the negotiation, Hobert had no idea that those 4 Beyonders had such deep backgrounds, much less that an ambassador would help with the investigation. Hearing Hobert's explanation, Jessica visibly relaxed. Even if they find our current residence, they would never dare to act, and with you at the law firm, I am also safe. There's no need to worry. This time it was Hobert's turn to be surprised, so confident. Jessica smiled and nodded. Hobert chuckled. All right. Oh, by the way, I prepared a few extraordinary materials for Kelly. Tomorrow? No, I have something to do tomorrow. You can take them back to her on Saturday. You can give them to Kelly yourself, Jessica said with a smile. We trust you completely and are not afraid of you knowing our current hiding place. Good, I want to see where you're hiding now to be so confident. After Jessica left, Hobert spent the entire afternoon working. In fact, he wasn't particularly busy. Most of the time he was dealing with documents, helping his subordinate lawyers review their defense plans, and so on. After work, Hobert took a taxi carriage home to Queen's District. As the carriage just left a street, Hobert saw an artist performing a puppet show by the roadside. The entertainment options of this era were scarce for someone like Hobert, a person from the modern age, but for people of this era, they were quite rich. More refined ones included plays, operas, dances, symphonies, and so on. More common ones included circus performances, and the music box cart, also known as the magic sound cart, often seen on backland streets. The magic sound cart usually had the appearance of a pushcart, with a box or some animal-shaped design on it. There was a handle on the outside of the design. As long as you wound it with the handle, it would start playing music. In fact, inside the design was a music cylinder. For citizens who rarely heard music, this was a good form of entertainment. This was actually a way to attract customers. Small vendors would play music, attracting many children, and then sell small toys, or small tools, cosmetics, and other items that the children's mothers might use. Another common form of entertainment was the puppet show. For Hobert, who had watched animated films, puppet shows were actually not very interesting. First, the bald uncle who broke character by imitating the princess's voice was very distracting. Second, the puppets' movements were very stiff. Many times, they were just dragged back and forth on the small stage by strings. However, this still attracted many spectators, mostly children, and some citizens who had finished their day's work. The income of puppet show performers mainly came from audience tips. Children would use their few pennies to ask the puppet show performer to continue performing. Sitting in the carriage today, Hobert glanced at the puppet show by the roadside, and a thought suddenly occurred to him. I wonder if that bald puppet show performer might be a marionettist. Following this line of thought, Hobert suddenly thought of an application for the country of disorder. He planned to try it out in the country of disorder that night. Back home, the dining table was much emptier. At the dining table, Hobert told Christine that he planned to go explore an ancient tomb with a mercenary team tomorrow. Be careful. More than the ancient tomb, you should be careful of your teammates and prevent being ambushed by people who have already targeted you. Christine seemed to think of something. Don't feel burdened. Just live your life as usual. There's no need to worry that your actions will conflict with mine. Hobert nodded. I understand. After dinner, Christine called Hobert to the study. Only when he arrived at the study did Hobert realize that the three magical items were ready: a dinner knife, a small wine glass, and a soup spoon. The soup spoon was larger and deeper than the psychological spoon, making it easy to distinguish the two. Without asking, this must have been the artisan master that the original owner's birth mother found to create the magical items. Hobert also didn't understand why that artisan got so involved with cutlery. The appearance of these magical items was too jarring. He was supposed to be looking for a fight, but he went with a dinner knife and a fork. Anyone who didn't know would think he was going to a restaurant to eat and had gone to the wrong place. After thanking Christine, Hobert took the three magical items back to his room to study them. The average daily subscription passed 800 yesterday. Theoretically, the author will get some more recommendations, so I'm adding an extra chapter. Thank you all for your subscriptions and support. *******. Chapter 289 3 Magical Items Received. While Christine gave Hobert the magical item, she also gave him a list. It detailed the abilities and negative effects of the three magical items. As an artisan, he could clearly understand the abilities and negative effects of the magical items he created. First was the dinner knife, whose abilities were travel, flash, and record. Hobert was very pleased when he saw the abilities. Although they all had certain usage limitations, the three classic abilities of the Traveler pathway were all preserved. The limitations of the three abilities were as follows. Travel could only be used once, and then 1 minute had to pass before it could be used again. Flash was limited to 5 consecutive flashes, and half a minute had to pass before it could continue to flash. Record had no time limit, but it could only record one demigod level ability, with only 40% of its original power, 2 sequence 5 level abilities, with only 60% of their original power, and 6 sequence 6 and below level abilities, with 80% of their original power. Compared to a true traveler, there were indeed many restrictions, but Hobert was not a traveler. These abilities were already enough to save his life, just as the hanged man Alger had described. Enemies would find it very difficult to easily kill him, and a metropolis like Backland would not be able to trap him. Looking at the negative effect, the holder would become very afraid of cats. After taking it off, the negative effect would disappear. It was indeed the old craftsmanship. A negative effect like being afraid of cats would be difficult for enemies to use, unless by sheer coincidence. Hobert couldn't help but try it. He infused his spirituality into the dinner knife, and everything around him became unreal. He once again entered the spirit world, where there was no distinction between up, down, left, and right. In just a few seconds, he appeared in his rented room on Blanca Street, holding the dinner knife. Looking at the rented room in the darkness, Hobert couldn't help but smile. If Furs saw him now, she would definitely think he had woken up hungry in his sleep. After waiting a minute in the living room of the rented room, Hobert used the travel ability again and returned to his bedroom in Queen's District. An hour-long car ride only took 4 or 5 seconds. Hobert thought to himself, from now on, he would never be afraid of being late again. He continued to look at the list. Next was the small wine glass, which was only about 2 fingers thick and shaped like a metal goblet. Its abilities were psychic, manipulate corpses, consign contracts with 2 underworld creatures, and underworld gate. There was also a passive skill, spirit vision. As long as it was worn, one would constantly be in a state of spirit vision without consuming the holder's spirituality. Spirit vision, psychic, and manipulate corpses needed no explanation. They were characteristic skills of the death pathway. The latter 2 abilities were a complete surprise. Although Hobert himself could not create an underworld-like environment and could not become a vessel for undead or spirit world creatures, he could sign contracts with 2 underworld creatures, which meant he gained 2 assistants. When needed, he only needed a simple incantation to summon them from the underworld. Regarding this ability, the list also had a more detailed explanation. The spirit world creatures summoned using this ability are relatively high level, so they must be respected and prevented from attacking. Once a contract is signed, they will not attack the holder, but spoils of war must be shared with them, otherwise they will tear up the contract and attack the holder. When Hobert saw the share spoils of war clause, he decided not to summon them easily. Underworld Gate, on the other hand, opened the gate to the underworld. If only a crack was opened, the creatures of the underworld would only gaze at the enemy, filling the enemy's heart with fear. If the gate was fully opened, the creatures of the underworld would scramble to drag the enemy. If the enemy did not have a proper countermeasure, they would eventually be pulled into the underworld. The restriction of this ability was, the interval between uses must be greater than 24 hours, otherwise the ability cannot be used. As for the negative effect of the small wine glass, a feeling of cold all over, even if dressed thickly, or even standing by a fire, it would not help. Hobert held the small wine glass and felt it. For him, this level of cold was not too big a problem. For ordinary people, feeling cold all over easily leads to colds, but for strong beyonders, it was just cold, and it was unlikely to cause illness. Hobert then sighed. With this small wine glass, the psychic necklace could be retired. Finally, looking at the spoon, it only had 2 abilities, Steel Skin and Decay. Steel Skin was exactly the ability Hobert wanted. This was more like a passive skill. As long as one held the magical item, one would possess this ability. And Decay was like a bonus ability, which could make creatures rapidly decay, plants wither, and create a small patch of decaying mud on the ground. It seemed to be of little use, only useful in specific locations and situations. So Hobert felt that this skill was like something given away with a phone top-up, useless, yet he couldn't bear to throw it away. However, as long as it had the Steel Skin ability, it met Hobert's requirements. As for the negative effects, they were greater than the sum of the previous 2 magical items. One would become fond of killing and bloodthirsty, and would involuntarily become cruel. This made Hobert sigh. Even the best artisan would feel somewhat powerless when faced with the extraordinary characteristic of the prisoner pathway, and would find it difficult to control the negative effects of magical items. And these negative effects would generally affect the holder's temperament. Hobert considered neutralizing the negative effects of the spoon with the negative effects of the fighting ring, and at the same time, he could continuously distort the cruel and bloodthirsty thoughts using the distortion of a corrupted Baron level. Hobert held the spoon and felt it. After this neutralization and distortion, he indeed felt much less murderousness and cruelty. Next was the naming process. They were still named according to their attributes. Hobert named the dinner knife the traveler's blade, the small wine glass the psychic wine glass, and the spoon, of course, the steel spoon. When naming the spoon, Hobert paused slightly. Steel spoon didn't seem to express its extraordinary attribute, and decay spoon didn't sound good either. Finally, Hobert decided, let's just call it the living corpse spoon. After equipping these three magical items, Hobert's strength advanced another level, and he became even more confident about tomorrow's exploration. Next was considering how to carry these items for combat. Hobert had encountered such a problem in previous battles. The tang knife already required one hand. Would he have to pull out whatever he needed from his pocket when the time came? Pulling out a bunch of spoons and forks would be too disrespectful to the opponent. After all, he was there to fight. Why would he need to eat a meal in the middle of a fight? The key was that it was easy to grab the wrong item, and it would take up time. After much thought, Hobert went downstairs and asked the maid to sew a few fabric buttons on his coat. He would insert the magical items into the fabric buttons and carry them close to his body. When he needed an item, he would just infuse his spirituality into it. Hobert then took down all his shirts and asked the maid to sew fabric buttons on all of them tomorrow. The only impact was that, no matter how hot it got, he could no longer go out wearing only a shirt, otherwise people could easily judge from the shapes appearing on his shirt that Hobert was carrying knives, forks, spoons, and a small wine glass on his chest. Others wore medals on their chests, but he wore cutlery, as if he was afraid people wouldn't know he was a foodie. Hobert returned to his bedroom. It was already past 9 in the evening. He didn't feel tired, so he entered the country of disorder to conduct the experiment he had thought of when he returned in the afternoon. Sitting on the Iron Throne, he first glanced at the pool, confirming that no one was praying to him. He figured Raft hadn't reached Connaught yet, or if he hadn't had time to go to the graveyard. Hobert gestured towards the stone platform, and the crow-feathered golden-horned evil creature's skull floated into his hand. Its skull was nothing special, just like an ordinary animal's skull, but its two golden horns were quite unique, with very vibrant colors, somewhat resembling the colored gold Hobert had seen in the Ad era. Hobert manipulated the skull, making it fly to the opposite side of the pool. Immediately after, he mobilized surging order, chaos, and distortion powers and piled them onto the skull. When these powers touched the golden horns, the three powers suddenly began to shape themselves. After a moment's thought, Hobert allowed these powers to stack on their own. After all, this was in the country of disorder, and he could extract the three streams of power at any time. A few seconds later, a giant beast emitting a black, illusory light appeared before Hobert. It wore a black, magnificent robe, had black, illusory fur, and its facial features were all black but very distinct. Its two golden horns also began to emit a golden light. Overall, besides an indescribable magical feeling, it even possessed a sense of sanctity and holiness. Hobert felt it, and as he expected, he could use the association between the country of disorder and the monster to give simple commands to the monster before him, such as attacking a certain target or protecting a certain target. After all, the monster was entirely composed of the country of disorder's power. However, those two golden horns gave this monster a very basic intelligence. Hobert was essentially using the golden horns to control the country of disorder's power. This monster could also exist in the real world, and without the ritual of bestowment, Hobert could directly project it into the real world based on the stars in the pool. Through his spiritual perception, Hobert clearly understood the abilities this monster possessed, but the extent of its power was unclear. It would be best to find an opponent for it to see what level of monster it roughly was. After thinking it over, Hobert remembered the blurry figure sealed in the pool at the foot of the mountain. So, with a wave of his hand, that blurry figure appeared before the monster. Hobert commanded the monster to attack the blurry figure. The golden horns on the monster's head glowed brightly, and the hall Hobert had built was immediately filled with a frantic aura. This was a mental attack. For ordinary Beyonders, just seeing the glowing golden horns would cause trauma to their spiritual body. All the power of defilement in their spirituality and all the power of madness in their mind would boil, threatening to completely strip them of their sanity at any moment. This was an area of effect skill, and its sequence was not low. The blurry figure had not even reacted before being hit by such a fierce impact, which made it appear much fainter. Then the monster launched a second attack. It opened its mouth and let out a sound as if it were the most defiled sound in this world, instantly causing the figure to become fallen. If he were a normal Beyonder, he would now be a grotesque monster devoid of reason. Hobert discovered that the country of disorder seemed to constantly provide power to the blurry figure, preventing him from dissipating and allowing him to continuously recover. This made Hobert lament, "Is there a better target in the world than this?" Then the monster successively used the powers of order, chaos, and distortion against the figure. This caused the blurry figure immense suffering. At first, he still wanted to sit on the iron throne under Hobert's butt, as he usually did, but later he seemed to lose that idea, only wanting to escape the monster's attack range. Hobert nodded, very satisfied with the results of this experiment. After resealing the blurry figure, who was already questioning his existence, back into the pool at the foot of the mountain, Hobert drained the monster's power, and it reverted to its original lifeless state. Through the previous experiment, Hobert roughly understood that the golden horns' abilities were two: mental attack and word of defilement. The level of these two abilities was roughly between sequence 4 and sequence 3. Hobert estimated that the crow-feathered golden-horned evil creature should be a sequence 3 level monster, because the descent process was not completed at that time, so the two golden horns could only provide the sequence of sequence 4 to sequence 3. Hobert still felt a chill recalling it. Fortunately, he and the Night Watcher squad members in Tingen City prevented the descent process at that time, otherwise, the consequences would have been unimaginable. In addition, the power of the country of disorder could also allow the monster to use the three abilities of order, chaos, and distortion. Due to the monster's limited sequence, the power of these three abilities was also between sequence 4 and sequence 3. And because this was the power of the country of disorder, the source of power possessed an extremely high sequence. Even if the power did not reach sequence 3, enemies of sequence 3 or even sequence 2 could be affected by these three abilities. This monster could exist in the real world for about 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, it would collapse because the power bestowed upon it by the country of disorder would be diluted by the real world. The power within the golden horns was not inexhaustible either. Hobert estimated it could be used about 10 more times. The success of this experiment greatly enriched Hobert's methods, and this could become Hobert's helper in the real world. Hobert could completely come to the country of disorder, have this monster descend into the real world, and then guide the monster to its target using a wax seal made from an order crystal as a medium. Before this, Hobert could either only be in the country of disorder or only in the real world, but now he had a channel to connect the powers of both. This was like opening a brand new pathway for Hobert. Hobert then took out the eye he had obtained from Old Neil's ritual and the bile of the evil god's offspring he had obtained from the Blackthorn Security Company in Tingen City from the stone box, and conducted experiments on them successively. These two items also had the same effect as the golden horns. They could both automatically shape themselves using the power of the country of disorder, and the sequence of the monsters formed after shaping was quite high, both around sequence 2. Unfortunately, they contained the will of a god, and Hobert had no way to control them. The monsters they formed continuously carried out indiscriminate attacks. This made Hobert lament, "Such good things can only be used under specific circumstances." For convenience of distinction, Hobert named these three monsters. The monster formed by the golden horns was called Ox Demon King, the monster formed by the black eye was called Hundred-Eyed Demon Monarch, and the monster formed by the bile of the evil god's offspring was called Holy Infant King. Hobert successively placed these three special magical items back into the box, satisfied with the names he had given them. Then he tried to wrap the Black Emperor card with the power of the country of disorder. Although he obtained a majestic Black Emperor image, it remained motionless like a stone statue, lacking sufficient spirituality. Wrapping a certain extraordinary characteristic with the power of the country of disorder also yielded a similar result. The formed image completely lacked autonomy, like a true puppet. It seems that not all magical items can be used. Finally, Hobert suddenly wondered what would happen if the power of the country of disorder was injected into the ancient death god's corpse. The morning fog in Backland was at its thickest, making the entire winter in Backland cold and damp. On Thursday morning, Hobert took a rented carriage to Order Square. He looked at the people already rushing for their livelihoods in the mist, or the vagrants who resembled living corpses, and his mood was not very pleasant. Only after he got into the rented carriage this morning did he remember that he already had the ability to travel. Why was he still taking a carriage? But he was already in the carriage, and then he thought that there were many people in Order Square. Using the ability to travel to appear would seem too conspicuous, so he still had to take a carriage. Recalling the astonishing thought from last night, Hobert still felt a lingering fear. What if the power of the Order Kingdom was injected into the ancient death god's corpse, and the ancient death god came back to life? What then? Perhaps this was the resurrection opportunity that Gregare, the undying bird, had been eagerly awaiting. Today, Hobert reconsidered this question and felt that yesterday's idea was completely overthinking. First, he injected the power of order, not the power of the undead, which was incompatible with Gregare's sequence. Secondly, the power of order did not have the ability to bring the dead back to life, as described in a certain web novel Hobert had read. At most, these powers would energize an object that had lost its life, allowing them to regain temporary spirituality and vitality, but this was not life, it was just a loophole in death, and would not produce intelligence. It certainly wouldn't revive an ancient god. On the contrary, the power of order would even block some channels for that ancient god's resurrection. After all, the loophole in death found by the shadow of order, allowing the Black Emperor to revive, was a normal phenomenon, but resurrection of other meanings did not conform to the relevant order. Hobert sighed. Order has always been so double-standard. While he was lost in thought, they arrived at Order Square. The stout Austin and his 6 team members had already arrived. Besides Hobert, the new team member, a woman named Lena, in her 30s, also joined the team. It was said that this lady, whose face looked as pale as a dead person, had rich experience in exploring ancient tombs, or rather, grave-robbing experience. Hobert guessed she should be a Beander of the death sequence, but her specific sequence was not yet discernible. After everyone was assembled, under Austin's command, they boarded 2 different carriages, and the 9 people officially set off. There were many such small extraordinary teams in Backland. They were mainly divided into 2 categories. One type was like this mercenary team, living a life of fighting and killing, or like Austin's team, searching for treasures in the extraordinary world. The other type was an organization of teachers and students, with a relatively loose organizational structure, more like a mutual aid society. Hobert, Austin, and Lena rode in the same carriage. Austin said, "Although you 2 are joining our team for the first time, you are either retired military officers or have intricate connections with the military. I believe you understand the importance of team discipline." Hobert thought to himself, as expected, he wants to establish the captain's authority first. Lena, beside him, slowly nodded. Austin continued, "I hope that during this operation, you will execute my orders without compromise. Many times, this might save our lives." Hobert smiled and said, "No problem with that, but I also hope you can understand that respect is mutual." The implication was, "Don't try to use me as cannon fodder." Austin frowned, but then thought of Hobert's strength. "Good, no problem." He seemed not to have heard Hobert's latter words. Next, Austin began to explain some details of the operation. According to the clues, they found an ancient tomb in the mountains northwest of Backland, with the specific location already nearing Eastchester County. Because there was no direct steam train to that place, taking a carriage was more convenient. though it would take about 6 hours of travel. Hobert checked his pocket watch. They departed around 8 in the morning and would reach their destination by 2 in the afternoon. Then he sighed inwardly. To avoid exposing his true strength, he could only ride in the carriage with them. It wasn't a big deal when he didn't have the ability to travel, but now that he had it and couldn't use it, Hobert felt a bit speechless. After the carriage traveled for more than 3 hours, they began to enter the mountainous area, and the surrounding population gradually became sparse. Around noon, they stopped by the roadside for about 10 minutes, eating some dry rations or simple meals. The road gradually became desolate. At first, both sides of the road were full of withered grass, and later, grass also started to grow on the road surface. Because winter had already set in, most of these grasses had withered, but a small portion still stubbornly retained a hint of green. According to Austin, this was a logging road. After winter set in, it was the time for workers to fell trees, and the cut timber would be transported out of the mountains starting next spring. So, it was bustling in the mountains at this time, but there were few pedestrians and vehicles on the road. After they could no longer see any signs of human habitation, they needed to walk the rest of the way. The 2 coachmen would camp here to guard the carriages. Everyone carried some necessary equipment and food, continuing their journey with hardly any pause. As beyonders, carrying a large pack of equipment each did not feel strenuous. Soon, everyone arrived at a hill with good visibility, from which they could clearly see a small basin in front of it. Such terrain was common in these hilly regions. Mountains surrounded a basin whose end could be seen at a glance. A small river flowed through the basin, but it was a seasonal river. Now the river was very small, and one could see several small lakes, or rather, large puddles, left by the river water on the riverbed. Austin, who was walking at the very front, said, "We can confirm that the ancient tomb is in this basin, but we have searched here diligently for over a week and haven't found any trace of it." Hobert asked Lena, "If we communicate with the spirits around here, can we find clues to the ancient tomb?" "The probability of getting clues is very low," Lena replied coldly. "Most spirits don't care about these things. If it's a vengeful spirit from the ancient tomb, I estimate it won't need us to find him, he will come to find us." Hobert nodded and said to Austin, "I'll lead the way." As he spoke, he opened a black box and took out a bracelet with South Continent characteristics. This was the sealed artifact that easily made its holder encounter ancient tombs. If not actively used, it had 2 negative effects. It was easy to be hated by undead creatures, the wearer would increasingly enjoy telling ghost stories, and the plots in the ghost stories would easily be encountered by the holder. Being hated by undead creatures didn't bother Hobert much, but the point about ghost story plots easily being encountered by the holder still needed to be avoided as much as possible, so he would only wear it when absolutely necessary. So, Hobert led the team, and a team member reminded him, "The path you chose is very difficult to walk." "That means we are walking on the right path," Hobert said, striking the obstructing withered grass with his staff as he walked forward. Chapter 292, Extraordinary Mechanisms in the Tomb Passage. In reality, Hobert didn't know where to go either. He simply let his spirituality guide him, leading the way haphazardly, sometimes circling, sometimes retreating. If others hadn't known that Hobert carried a sealed artifact that made him prone to encountering ancient tombs, they probably would have kicked him out of the team long ago. After walking and stopping, Hobert finally halted before a small lake on a riverbed. There was a small open space nearby. Austin and the others had camped here before. It was now around 4 in the afternoon, so Austin left a few people to set up camp while he personally followed behind Hobert. Hobert, however, circled the small lake several times. He looked at the lake. The water was clear, and he could see the bottom at a glance, with no entrance or similar structure visible. Hobert handed the bracelet to Austin. "Take this and walk around. Don't have any specific purpose, just wander freely." Austin was slightly startled, not expecting Hobert to so generously hand over this sealed artifact to him. For Beander mercenaries, a sealed artifact was a rare and valuable item. Even if they encountered one, they usually couldn't bear to buy it, as purchasing potion formulas and main ingredients could deplete all their savings. What Austin didn't know was that Hobert possessed as many as 7 extraordinary items, and even a level 2 sealed artifact. Even Hobert's staff, the stone fragment in his pocket, and the wax seal on his waist were all single-use extraordinary items. For Hobert, the ability of this bracelet was rather useless, he didn't even bother to name it. Austin left the developing campsite with the bracelet, but he returned shortly after. Austin was slightly stunned and left again, only to return shortly again. Hobert smiled. All right, the entrance to the ancient tomb should be beneath this small lake. Everyone gathered at the lake, but no matter how they looked, it didn't seem like there was an entrance to an ancient tomb. A team member guessed, could it be that stones and sand have covered the tomb door? If that were the case, it would be troublesome. They would have to pump out the water first, then move the stones and clear the sand before they could enter the ancient tomb. Then everyone looked at each other, wondering who would dive down to investigate first. It was already winter, and the lake water was freezing cold. Even Beyonders wouldn't enjoy such a feeling, so no one was willing to go down for a while. Lena suddenly said, "I'll find a spirit to go down and explore." Only then did everyone realize the role of their new teammate. Lena took a deep breath, her sclera completely turning black, standing motionless. Hobert guessed that this should be a Sequence 7 telepath. So he had a general idea of the team's strength. Austin was a judge, his vice captain was a briber, and the other members were Sequence 8 and Sequence 9. After a full 7 or 8 minutes, Lena's sclera returned to normal. The tomb door is indeed down there, and it's half open. The entrance is completely buried by stones and sand. Austin asked the question everyone was most concerned about. It's half open. Yes, someone entered a long time ago, Lena said. But they seem to have encountered an unknown danger and died in the tomb passage. Their extraordinary characteristics are already covered in dust. Everyone was startled at first, then became excited. Since the other party didn't succeed, not only were the treasures in the tomb chamber untouched, but their extraordinary characteristics would also be the reward of this exploration. Austin asked, "Who will go down to check the entrance situation?" Several team members were enthusiastic, eagerly volunteering to go down and investigate. Lena, however, pointed to a nearby high ground. The path underwater is very difficult. It would be better to dig directly into the tomb passage from there. We'll just enter the tomb passage directly. She walked to the high ground and pointed in the opposite direction of the camp. It's roughly this position. The tomb passage is quite wide, so it doesn't matter if we dig a little off-center. Everyone quickly went to get tools, while at the same time sighing in their hearts that the 2 new teammates were truly effective. The ancient tomb they had searched for so long without finding was quickly located directly to its passage with the cooperation of the 2 new teammates. It wasn't yet the season for frozen earth, so the soil here was very soft, though some gnarled tree roots were harder to dig. But this was no challenge for the Beyonders. At dusk, everyone had dug through to the tomb passage. They threw a torch inside and could see the corpses and extraordinary characteristics Lena had mentioned not far away. Everyone discussed it and decided to have dinner and then go down for a preliminary exploration. During dinner, because there was a bonfire, they could eat something warm, at least have a cup of hot tea. During the meal, Austin made the personnel assignments. Roy, the team's vice captain, and 2 team members would provide support on the surface, while Austin, Hobert, Lena, and 3 other team members would go down together. After eating and drinking their fill, everyone organized their equipment, lit their lanterns and torches, and prepared to enter the tomb passage. Before setting off, Hobert asked Vice Captain Roy, "Do you have any candles?" Roy was slightly startled. Candles are not as convenient as torches. Hobert said, "In my hometown, there's a custom that when entering a tomb chamber and opening a coffin, you light a candle in the northeast corner." Roy didn't ask further and found a candle for Hobert. Around 7 in the evening, 1 team member jumped into the tomb passage first, followed closely by Austin and Lena, then the other 2 team members, with Hobert bringing up the rear. The tomb passage was only about 1 meter wide and 2 meters high, making it feel a bit oppressive to walk through. The front section of the tomb passage was about 5 or 6 meters long. Roughly in the middle, there was a skeleton that looked ancient, its bones already turned gray. On the skeleton, there was a gem-like extraordinary characteristic, its colors dazzling under the light. Austin, who was walking in front, put it into a wooden box. Keep it with me for now. We'll distribute it uniformly after we get out. He said this for Lena and Hobert's benefit. From now until after the distribution of spoils, it was a high-risk period for internal strife. Austin then examined the skeleton. It looks like it was killed by a sharp weapon. The time of the skeleton's death was too long ago, there was hardly any useful information to be seen. Ahead was a corner, and at the corner, there was another body, its extraordinary characteristic also long covered in dust. The density of bodies was a bit too frequent. Austin said, "From now on, stay alert." The team member walking at the very front took out his revolver, took a deep breath, and led the way. But as soon as he turned the corner, the people behind immediately noticed that this team member had become abnormal. He looked ahead ecstatically. What a beautiful sight. As he spoke, he raised his revolver, aimed it at his temple, and fired a shot. It all happened too fast. Austin didn't even have time to stop him. This team member was already dead. What exactly did he see? Austin, who was at the very front of the team, looked solemn. He asked those behind him, "What did you just see? Or do you have any clues?" Hobert, who was at the very back, had his spirit vision constantly active because he always carried the psychic wine glass. He saw that the spiritual energy overflowing from the team member at the front was turning black, as if he had been attacked by a curse-like ability. Lena, behind Austin, said, "My spirit vision didn't detect anything unusual." This made Hobert pause. Had he seen wrong? He scrutinized the deceased team member again, confirming his judgment was correct. So, Hobert re-evaluated Lena, but remained calm, acting as if nothing had happened. Austin thought for a moment, "I'll close my eyes and try walking into the corridor ahead. If there's any danger, warn me immediately." This was a good idea, but it reminded Hobert of some unpleasant experiences. However, he was certain that there wouldn't be any high-level monsters or sealed artifacts from the death pathway ahead, otherwise everyone in the tomb passage would already be living corpses. Austin took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and stood at the corner. The two team members behind Lena quickly stepped forward, ready to grab their captain if he tried to commit suicide. Everyone held their breath. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Austin suddenly spoke, "I feel incredibly curious, constantly wanting to open my eyes and look forward. But if I use extraordinary power to resist, I can suppress the urge to open my eyes." He leaned against the wall as he returned, letting out a long sigh before saying, "If we cover our eyes and just don't look ahead, feeling our way through the tomb passage, we can avoid this trap." Lena immediately agreed, "Good idea." However, Hobert, at the very back, said, "I don't think so. After closing our eyes, there must be other traps waiting for us. Perhaps the gravekeeper's goal is to make us close our eyes, and then, deprived of sight, we'll step into other, more despair-inducing traps." Lena frowned. "I've explored many ancient tombs, and generally, they don't have overly complex extraordinary traps. Covering our eyes should solve the problem." Hobert smiled and shook his head. "I can't speak for ancient tombs of other pathways, but if you deal with an ancient tomb of the diviner pathway according to common sense, you will definitely fall into the gravekeeper's trap." He pointed to the ground. "See that skeleton? The previous group of explorers also lost someone here, but why didn't the other explorers make it out alive? And there was an explorer who died from severe injuries in the tomb passage just now." When Hobert said this, everyone realized that the other members of the previous expedition team must have died in the tomb passage ahead, with only one severely injured person escaping, but even he didn't make it out. The muscles on Austin's chubby face twitched. "Then what should we do?" "I'll go to the very front," Hobert said, "I'll clear the way." Austin paused slightly, then warned, "That's very dangerous." "Of course, I know," Hobert suddenly smiled. He had already made an assessment, the curse's rank was not too high. At the very front, Hobert held the pocket watch key made of order crystal at his waist with one hand and his staff with the other. He stepped out from the corner of the tomb passage and looked ahead. The tomb passage ahead wasn't long, about 3 or 4 meters. The light from the lantern showed an oil painting hanging on the wall at the corner of the tomb passage. Under a blue sky with white clouds, a lush green tree swayed in the wind. As far as the eye could see, there was a field of vibrant green grass. The white clouds were very low, like fluffy cotton candy that could fall from the sky at any moment. At the end of the grassland, there seemed to be a figure, but he was very, very far away, too distant to make out his appearance, or even to distinguish if he was male or female. "What a beautiful scene," Hobert couldn't help but exclaim. The people behind him were all startled. Austin was already preparing to close his eyes and rush over to save Hobert. It was at this instant that Hobert saw the tree branches in the painting actually swaying, and the grass rippled in a gust of wind. Hobert even felt the summer breeze in the gloomy, damp tomb passage. The grassland seemed to suddenly leap out of the oil painting. Sunlight filled the tomb passage, and Hobert felt as if he were in an ocean of green grass and wildflowers. The pocket watch key in Hobert's hand prevented him from feeling any sense of intoxication. Just then, the figure at the end of the grassland began to move. The figure moved incredibly fast, approaching like a flash, and soon arrived before him. He had only a human shape, over 2 meters tall, but was gaunt and emaciated, with no head or neck. His 2 eyes were on his chest, and he had no other facial features. This appearance somewhat resembled Xingtian in Hobert's memory, but it lacked Xingtian's majestic, heroic, and death-defying aura. Instead, due to his emaciated body and sharp claws on his hands, he exuded an indescribable eerie feeling. After seeing those evil eyes, Hobert immediately infused his spiritual energy into the pocket watch key, forming a spiritual wall in front of him. Crack! A small spark flashed on the spiritual wall, blocking the monster's curse. Austin and the others behind saw the black crystal-like spiritual wall. They felt an intense sense of oppression and all took a step back. Especially Austin, who gained a new understanding of Hobert's strength. For him, this was already the second magical item on Hobert. The monster that emerged from the painting showed angry eyes and lunged at Hobert with its sharp claws. Hobert drew his Tang Dao and charged forward. Clang! A metallic clash sounded. The monster was very strong, but apart from its curse and claws, it seemed to have no other means of attack. Madness! Hobert used the ability of the psychological spoon. The monster immediately fell into a state of madness. Hobert stepped forward, blocked one of the monster's sharp claws with his arm, and stabbed out one of its chest eyes. Hobert, empowered by the living corpse spoon, had an arm as hard as steel. That sharp claw only tore his clothes. The intense pain quickly woke the monster from its madness, and its other eye was filled with terror. Hobert's hand moved, and his blade struck, cutting the monster from its left shoulder to its right waist. The monster, severed in 2, fell to the ground and struggled a few times before becoming still. Putting away his blade, Hobert glanced at the painting. It was still a beautiful landscape, and the scene within still seemed capable of manifesting into reality at any moment. Hobert said to the people behind him, "Come over, this trap has been destroyed by me." Austin cautiously asked, "Is it okay to keep our eyes open?" Hobert said, "I'm keeping my eyes open right now." Only then did everyone turn the corner and see the monster's appearance, letting out a sigh of relief. Looking at the painting again, it was indeed a beautiful landscape. One of the team members said, at the end of the grassland, there seems to be a figure." Hobert, who had wiped his tang knife, also went over for a look. Sure enough, the figure deep in the grass was still there, but he did not come out of the painting again. Hobert took down the painting and turned it towards the wall. The effect of this sealed artifact is still there. I need to go back and study it carefully to understand its abilities. For now, this painting will not pose a danger to anyone. So everyone's gaze turned to the next section of the tomb passage. The next section of the tomb passage became much wider, and its length was only about 5 or 6 meters. At the end of the passage were 2 tomb doors. In the middle of the tomb passage were two stone statues, resembling ancient knights, wearing armor and holding severely rusted weapons. In front of the stone statues lay three skeletons, appearing as if they had been cut in half at the waist or split into two sections, looking very messy. It was only by the number of extraordinary characteristics that they knew there were three skeletons. Hobert, holding his tang knife, led the way. When he was about half a meter from the stone statues, their eyes suddenly turned crimson. They swung their two rusty weapons and slashed at Hobert. Hobert raised his knife to block one of the rusty weapons. He stepped forward and kicked over one of the stone statues. Austin, behind him, also drew his fine iron sword and blocked the attack from the other stone statue. After kicking down the stone statue, Hobert continued forward, stomping on its head. The two red eyeballs rolled far away, and the stone statue completely lost its life. He then swung his knife and cut off the head of the other stone statue, which also became motionless. Hobert's clean and decisive offensive made the two team members behind him cast admiring glances. Then their attention focused on the three skeletons. As long as they entered a certain range, the stone statues would attack anyone in the tomb passage. It was conceivable that if they had entered blindfolded, they would have been easily killed by the stone statues. Austin put away his sword, then took out a wooden box to collect the extraordinary characteristics and two pairs of red eyes from the ground. By this point, they had already acquired 5 extraordinary characteristics, 1 sealed artifact, and 2 pairs of extraordinary materials. It could be said that this exploration had already yielded a rich harvest. Everyone bypassed the stone statues and arrived in front of the tomb door. Hobert asked Austin, "What do you plan to do next?" "Of course, push or pull open the tomb door." Hobert's displayed strength made Austin's tone much more polite. He had already decided that, besides Hobert's own choice, he would give Hobert a piece of the spoils, as Hobert had played a huge role in the exploration process. "In that case, we can't push or pull." Hobert raised his tang knife and stabbed it into the tomb door. The tomb door was made of bluestone, but under Hobert's sharp tang knife, it was like tofu. No, there was no tofu in the north-south continent, it was as fragile as fresh cheese. Hobert, with his brute strength, forcibly cut an irregular opening in the tomb door, large enough for one person to pass through. With a gentle push forward, the cut stone slab was pushed inside. Austin raised his torch and looked. Inside was a spacious tomb chamber, with the stone coffin on the inner side of the chamber, and a row of burial objects placed on either side. Additionally, a rusted armor and an animal hide, whose animal could not be identified, hung on the wall. Was the gravekeeper a military general in his lifetime? Was the armor his personal possession, and the animal hide the fur of his favorite prey? After waiting for a while, there seemed to be no danger inside. Austin was the first to enter, holding his sword with both hands, vigilantly looking around the tomb chamber. A few seconds later, he asked Lena, "Are there any vengeful spirits?" Lena replied, "No." Only then did everyone enter the main tomb chamber one by one. Hobert, while taking candles out of his pocket, asked, "Where is the southeast corner?" The few people looked at each other, apparently having lost their sense of direction in the winding tomb passage. Hobert, helpless, randomly found an unobtrusive corner and lit the candle, considering it a bit of psychological comfort for himself. Austin and his 2 subordinates first looked back at the tomb door. There were bolts on the bottom inside the tomb door, which looked like they were part of a mechanism. Then Austin had one subordinate guard the door, while he took the other subordinate to examine the burial objects. Hobert, however, was not in a hurry to step forward, but rather watched Lena intentionally or unintentionally. The gains in the tomb chamber were also considerable, including some gold and silver artifacts and gemstones, as well as a necklace. Everyone's spirituality could sense that this necklace was a magical item, but its specific abilities were still unclear. These boxes holding the items were also antiques and could fetch a good price. Then, everyone's gaze turned to the stone coffin. On the stone coffin was a wooden box, not locked. Austin opened it, and inside the wooden box was a yellowed parchment, on which was written in Hermes, Open my stone coffin, disturb my peaceful sleep, and you will be cursed. Take the other burial objects and leave. This is the final warning. The few people looked at each other. In this extraordinary world, curses were real. They just didn't know if after thousands of years, the curse would have already failure. Finally, Austin said, "We've come all this way, how can we not look inside the stone coffin?" So everyone moved the already acquired burial objects aside. Austin and his two subordinates picked up crowbars to open the coffin. After much effort, the coffin was finally pried open. Hobert also came to help, and everyone successfully pushed the stone coffin. There was no strong wind blowing, nor any malicious curses echoing in the tomb chamber as everyone had imagined. Thud! The coffin lid hit the ground, revealing the scene inside. What surprised everyone was that there was only a corpse inside the coffin, and a thick, dust-covered book. The gravekeeper's extraordinary characteristic was not here. It was assumed he died naturally, and it was not buried with him at all. Austin muttered, "Bad luck." They risked being cursed by the gravekeeper, but there was nothing valuable inside. At this moment, Hobert suddenly noticed that when they were collecting the burial objects, it was Austin and one mercenary subordinate, but when they opened the coffin, how did it become Austin and two mercenary subordinates? Looking towards the tomb door again, the mercenary guarding the door was still there. An extra mercenary had appeared out of thin air. However, the light in the tomb chamber was dim, making it impossible to clearly see what the mercenary guarding the door looked like. Hobert tightened his grip on his staff, ready to leave the tomb chamber at any moment. At this time, Austin also noticed that he had two subordinates beside him. As he took the dust-covered book out of the stone coffin, he said, "Pete, I told you to guard the door, so guard it properly. Get back." The young man called Pete seemed not to have heard Austin's words, and even showed a strange smile. At the same time, in the direction of the tomb door, the mercenary guarding it asked, "Boss, did you just call me?" Everyone's movements stopped, and the temperature in the tomb chamber instantly dropped to freezing point. The Peter next to Austin suddenly lost his thickness and became like a paper-thin person. He spread his arms and rushed towards Austin, as if to give Austin a bear hug. Austin was too close to Peter, but it was too late to draw his sword or dodge, and even too late to drop the cumbersome books in his hand. Just at this critical moment, a black blade shadow drew a beautiful arc on Peter's body. Because the strike was so fast, the sound of the blade could be heard throughout the tomb chamber. Peter split into two, becoming two pieces of leather that looked like human skin and animal hide. The one who struck the blow just now was, of course, Hobert. He was originally prepared to rush out of the tomb chamber and leave, but he quickly realized that the animal hide hanging on the wall was gone. He immediately understood what was happening and struck to save Austin. Human skin shadow, Hobert explained as he put away his blade. Its characteristic is a sequence 6-level main material. At the same time, he sighed inwardly. K's path truly is the embodiment of strange. Even a Beander creature with a certain level of intelligence can create such a strange incident. Austin felt like he had survived a disaster. Storm above, thank you for letting me recruit Hobert into the team. Hobert had already saved him twice. Bang! Austin was about to thank Hobert when he heard a muffled gunshot from the direction of the entrance. Everyone's attention was drawn to the direction of the tomb door. Austin dropped the book in his hand. Quick! Return to the surface. He judged that this should be a warning from his teammates to those underground. The real Peter, who was guarding the door, was the first to rush out, followed by Austin and another mercenary. Lena and Hobert walked at the very back. As they passed the first corner, Hobert took the oil painting with him, to see if it could be useful later. When they reached the entrance between the tomb passage and the surface, Austin and the others stopped. They did not rush out rashly but chose to observe. But there was no sound outside, which made Austin and the others worried about their companions outside. Just as everyone was looking at the entrance, a dagger appeared in Lena's hand at some point, and she stabbed it towards Austin's lower back. Hobert noticed this and was about to kick Lena's wrist, but Austin reacted a step faster, grabbing Lena's wrist, spirit-piercing. Lena, her face full of pain, tried to get away, but Austin held her tightly. She gritted her teeth and summoned an undead, throwing it towards Austin. Exile. Austin exiled the undead, but still held Lena's wrist tightly. Hobert, who was about to make a move, stepped back, sighing inwardly that mercenaries in his own team were usually seasoned veterans. Although Austin looked very honest, he probably had long suspected Lena had problems and had been silently observing her every move. And Austin made the wisest choice, to capture Lena alive while the situation outside was still unknown. Lena, under immense mental pressure, her eyes turning black. Whip of pain. Austin, while being careful of new undead attacks, intensified his mental assault on Lena, trying to make Lena's mind collapse and faint as quickly as possible. Just as Lena was about to give out, a giant sword made of light suddenly pierced down from the tomb passage above Austin's head. He had no choice but to let go of Lena and quickly dodge. Lena's will to survive unleashed all her potential. She leapt fiercely, grabbed the top of the tomb passage at the entrance, and was about to jump out with an upward leap. Bang! Peter fired a shot, hitting Lena in the back. Lena noticeably stiffened, but still jumped out of the tomb passage. Hobert had already taken out the teleportation statue. He immediately sensed that there were several Beyonders guarding the entrance outside, and according to his feel, the one who had just thrust out the Dawn's sword should be a sequence 5 inches guardian. The other few also had at least 2 sequence 6s. Although Hobert had the opportunity to move Lena back, he did not do so. He still needed Lena to go out and convey some error information and make the enemies completely unprepared for Flash. Then Hobert thought that Austin and the others had obviously been targeted long ago, and the enemy had even used their recruitment opportunity to infiltrate an inside agent. After they entered the tomb passage, Lena somehow notified her accomplices waiting nearby. Ever since Lena, who had spirit vision, did not alert them that the dead mercenary member had committed suicide due to a curse, Hobert began to pay attention to her and guess her purpose. Therefore, Hobert, who was mentally prepared, was not worried about the current situation. "Let's rest for a bit first," Hobert said to Austin and the others who were preparing to jump out of the entrance. "There are many enemies outside, we'd best wait until they relax a little before going out." Austin and the other 3 were slightly stunned, but still followed Hobert deeper into the tomb chamber. Hobert placed the oil painting against the wall and actually leaned against the wall, sitting in the tomb passage to rest. "We've already expended a lot of physical and mental energy. Rushing out like this makes it hard to maintain optimal condition." "Makes sense." Austin also sat down with Hobert. Hobert then said, "I have a magical item that can roughly determine there are 7 or 8 enemies outside, one of whom is a sequence 5. Austin looked surprised, then a little despairing. Having been in the extraordinary world for so long, he naturally knew the gap between sequence 6 and sequence 5. Theoretically, one sequence 5 could deal with the 4 people in the tomb passage, and the 3 teammates outside should already be in grave danger. Hobert could, of course, leave with travel, but he wanted to try out his new equipment through combat, so he decided to stay and fight. It wouldn't be too late to run if he really couldn't win. "There are 2 plans now," Hobert said with a smile. "My magical item can also send you to the surface, so I suggest we divide the easily portable spoils here, and after reaching the surface, escape in different directions. The second plan is for me to send you to the enemy's side to launch a surprise attack, attempting to complete a counter-kill." Austin pondered for a moment before saying, "Let's divide these magical items and extraordinary characteristics. The gold and silver artifacts and jewelry are not easy to carry, so let's leave them." In his mind, even 2 sequence 6s would find it difficult to take down a sequence 5, especially since the opponent had other helpers. Austin then said, "According to our previous agreement, you choose first." "This painting and that necklace are mine," Hobert said. "Okay." Austin almost ignored Hobert's request to choose 2 spoils. As for him, the painting would also be difficult to carry away. Austin took out the necklace and handed it to Hobert. "There are 4 of us, later, we'll go in 4 directions." Hobert smiled. "Don't misunderstand, after you escape, I will swagger out of the entrance and then begin the hunt. You're crazy. Austin looked surprised. Lena will definitely tell all our information to the enemies outside. Even if we go up first and can draw away some enemies, they will still leave 1 or 2 experts to guard the entrance. Hobert maintained a smile on his face. I just want to have a hearty fight. Austin's mouth hung open, wondering if Hobert was crazy. Or was he crazy? Thank you all for your votes. Everyone's votes have been very strong these past few days, so the author's extra updates must also be as strong as ever. ******. Inside the tomb passage, Pete and another mercenary gradually grew anxious, but Austin remained calm, sitting across from Hobert, trying to recover his strength. Looking at Hobert, who was toying with the necklace, Austin still found it hard to believe that a sequence 6 would challenge a sequence 5. After resting for about half an hour, Hobert suddenly stood up and asked, "Are you ready?" Austin nodded, nimbly stood up, and patted the dust off his body. His agility was nothing like that of a fat man. Hobert took out the teleportation statue and gave a final reminder. Appearing suddenly from somewhere other than the entrance will definitely catch the enemies off guard, but you cannot be caught off guard. Once you're out, immediately find a direction to escape, don't run towards the enemies. Austin, however, asked, "What is the probability of victory for the counterattack you're initiating?" Hobert pondered for a moment. "I have a certain degree of confidence in defeating them, and I might even gain something, like Lena, who is already severely injured." Austin said, as if having made up his mind, "I want to join your plan." Pete and another subordinate were surprised. In their impression, Austin was a relatively steady captain, so why would he make such a risky choice today? Hobert was also a little surprised. "I have a way to escape at a critical moment. If there's danger, I'll immediately leave the battlefield." At that time, only Austin would be left, and the outcome would be obvious. However, the hesitation that had been in Austin's eyes was gone. "I always have to try to avenge Roy and the others, otherwise, even if I escape the pursuers, the guilt will surely make me regret it for the rest of my life." Besides, he had just thought it over. The probability of escape was also very small, so it was better to fight to the death and bet that Hobert truly had the ability to fight a sequence 5. Pete and the other mercenary were also stirred by Austin's words. "Captain, we'll join this operation too." Austin patted their shoulders. "Good job. But if there's a chance, you still have to try to escape. You are still young." For a moment, the atmosphere in the tomb passage became tragic yet passionate. "All right, if all of you join, the confidence in defeating them is even greater." Hobert smiled. "I'll explain the battle plan I just came up with. ... As winter descended, the wilderness at night was already somewhat cold. The bonfire at Austin's mercenary squad's original camp was still burning, but no one was warming themselves by it. This was a simple trap. People in the dark are unconsciously drawn to light and instinctively move towards it, especially when they feel insecure. The leader of this operation, the Guardian, leaned against a tree, smiling as he stared at the entrance of the tomb passage. Although he was not a hunter, he knew how to hunt. In the Guardian's view, his side already had an absolute advantage. The 4 prey below only had this one exit. He just needed to patiently wait for the prey to lose their composure and jump out. A direct assault on the tomb passage would not allow his side's numerical advantage to be fully utilized. Most importantly, the Guardian knew the situation of the 4 enemies in the tomb passage. Captain Austin should be a judge. There was also a new teammate named Hobert, suspected to be a hypnotist, because he had used the madness skill and had discovered Lena's problem early on. All these matched the characteristics of a spectator pathway meander. Additionally, he had a magical item that could create a black barrier, and a bracelet that made it easy to encounter ancient tombs. These 2 enemies were not difficult to deal with, as neither of them specialized in close combat. The Guardian believed that the prey would definitely fight to the death tonight. If it came to tomorrow, without water and food, they would lose their optimal state. Just at this moment, the Guardian's spirituality suddenly felt disturbed, which made him slightly startled. Had the briber who escaped earlier brought reinforcements? He hadn't heard that this mercenary squad had any background. He looked meaningfully at a companion, who was a Sequence 6 schemer. A figure suddenly appeared behind the schemer, holding a black katana in one hand and tightly gripping its sheath in the other. According to Lena's description, this person should be the new member Hobert, and the ability flash immediately came to the Guardian's mind. Could the opponent be a traveler? The person who suddenly appeared was, of course, Hobert. He had given the teleportation statue to Austin and had Austin teleport him next to a Sequence 6. Giving the teleportation statue to Austin was mainly because Hobert literally had no hands free, and he didn't want to use a precious flash opportunity at the very beginning. The key was also that he wasn't afraid of Austin escaping with the teleportation statue, as it had the aura of the country of disorder on it, making it easy to track. Hobert's sudden appearance caught his opponents off guard. In the first 1 or 2 seconds of the battle, the Guardian and the others found it difficult to react effectively immediately. He used the fastest and most direct attack method, thrusting the katana forward, stabbing towards the schemer. The schemer retreated frantically, while layers of flames immediately appeared on his body, but he was still half a beat too slow, and the flames on his body did not stop Hobert's katana. Puff! Hobert stabbed the katana into the schemer's chest. It was at this moment that an area of several tens of meters around them was enveloped in the dawn light, and time seemed to suddenly jump from night to morning. The Sequence 5 dawn light was much stronger than the Sequence 6. The Guardian, holding the dawn sword and clad in dawn armor, charged towards Hobert. Although the injured schemer was filled with fear at this moment, he thought it was the sudden appearance of the enemy that had startled him, and he didn't take it to heart. Logically speaking, such an injury would not be too severe for a schemer. He simply gripped the katana, preparing to trap Hobert or force Hobert to abandon his weapon. Hobert had not expected to instantly kill a Sequence 6. As long as he wounded the opponent, his goal would be achieved. The special nature of the katana would cause the opponent's injury to gradually worsen after 3 minutes. Hobert did not panic as the Guardian had imagined after failing to strike. Instead, he suddenly thrust his sheath into the ground. Order! In an instant, a tree more than 10 meters tall, with a crown dozens of meters wide, appeared before the Guardian. The Guardian was slightly startled, and raised the dawn sword to cut down the tree. Thump! A sound like heavy objects colliding was heard. The Guardian was surprised to find that the dawn sword, which could cut through metal like mud and break extraordinary abilities, had not caused the tree the slightest damage. Taking advantage of this opening, Hobert drew back his katana, and the sharp blade cut off 3 or 4 of the schemer's fingers. In the hand where he had originally held the sheath, there was now a stone chip. Loss of control. The stone chip was thrown towards the Guardian and the others who were rushing to support, and the extraordinary characteristics within their bodies were all impacted to varying degrees. Weakening. The Guardian, whose dawn sword in hand visibly dimmed, wondered, what pathway beyonder is this kid, after all? When Hobert used weakening, his surprise attack had already succeeded. That Guardian was obviously weakened, and the uncontrolled stone also made him pause, once again blocking his attack on Hobert. Another Sequence 7 who rushed to support was affected by the uncontrolled stone and, weakening, standing still, trying to recover. And a Sequence 8 who rushed over with the Guardian to support lost control on the spot, his flesh and blood expanding like a blown-up balloon. When he was underground, Hobert used the teleportation statue to figure out the enemy's details. The enemy had 1 Sequence 5, 2 Sequence 6s, 2 Sequence 7s, and 3 Sequence 8s. Just as Hobert expected, although his surprise attack caught the enemy off guard, their combat literacy was not bad, and they did not all rush over in a swarm to support. Only the Guardian brought a Sequence 7 and a Sequence 8 to support. The other enemies were still waiting near the entrance. This provided Hobert with the conditions to cut the battlefield. After Hobert retracted his blade, he quickly abandoned the schemer, flashed in front of that Sequence 7, and raised his hand for a strike. That Sequence 7's eyes were now filled only with surprise, and he had no time to react. Just as Sequence 7 was waiting for death, a bulwark radiating dawn light appeared in front of him, blocking this fatal blow for him. At the same time, Hobert felt a whistling sound behind him, and the schemer's fireball had already reached his back. So Hobert used Flash for the second time, dodging the fireball, and then used Flash again, arriving in front of the Sequence 8 guarding the entrance. With one strike, he killed this Sequence 8. It wasn't that the Guardian failed to use the Dawn Bulwark in time to block Hobert's attack. Rather, according to Hobert's estimation, he had moved nearly 20 meters with 3 flashes, plus the original distance between him and the Guardian. This was already beyond the range where the Dawn Bulwark could be cast. The battle had just begun, and already one Sequence 8 was dead, and another Sequence 8 had lost control. The Guardian shouted a warning, "Be careful. He is a traveler." This was a huge discrepancy from the information provided by Lena. Although Hobert also used some extraordinary abilities from the Black Emperor pathway, abilities like Flash were rarely encountered in extraordinary combat, and such magical items are even rarer. Compared to magical items, it is more likely to be a Beander of this pathway, which is why the Guardian judged him to be a traveler. As for the extraordinary abilities of other pathways, in the Guardian's view, they should have come from the Traveler's record ability. The Guardian and the Schemer were both very fast. In the time it took Hobert to kill, they had already encircled Hobert from left and right. The Schemer bent down and pressed on the ground. 2 fire dragons emerged from his 2 hands, quickly encircling Hobert along the ground. Just as Hobert was about to dodge, the Guardian, holding the Dawn Sword, had already blocked Hobert's retreat. Although the Guardian's power was greatly weakened, Hobert still would not engage him in a power duel. With another flash, Hobert escaped the encirclement of the Guardian and the Schemer. But as soon as he reappeared, the Schemer's fireball whistled towards him again, and the Guardian, holding the Dawn Sword, charged over with large strides again, once again blocking Hobert's retreat. So Hobert used his 5th flash, but as soon as he appeared, he was still within the attack range of the Schemer and the Guardian. In the hand of the Schemer, who had been constantly moving, there was now a crimson long whip composed of orange-red flames, with barbs on the whip, lashing towards Hobert. And the Guardian appeared in Hobert's other direction, once again going to block Hobert. The two, one long range and one close range, coordinated very skillfully. Especially the Guardian, he was clad in Dawn armor, looking a circle fatter than others, like a tank charging back and forth on the battlefield, but his speed was very agile, even comparable to the speed of the whip the Schemer lashed out. Their positioning was also very advanced. Hobert, who could only move 7 or 8 meters with each flash, would always be within their attack range no matter how he flashed. The 5 flash opportunities had been used up, and Hobert was completely suppressed by the 2 enemies, distortion. Hobert's flash was also very tactical. Although he seemed to be in a predicament during the last 2 flashes, he led the Guardian and the Schemer back under the Order Wood. With the bonus from the Order Wood, Hobert's distortion was perfectly accurate and completely effective. The Schemer's Crimson Flame Whip suddenly veered towards the Guardian. Hobert took advantage of this gap to avoid the pincer attack of the 2. The Guardian completely ignored the Crimson Flame Whip. The Crimson Long Whip struck his Dawn armor, creating obvious cracks, but in the dawn light, the armor quickly recovered. This was still with the Guardian in a weakened state that the Dawn armor developed cracks. If he were at full strength, it would only cause slight ripples. While the Guardian was still 2 or 3 meters away from him, Hobert already had a pocket watch in his hand. He grabbed in the direction of the Guardian, and the surroundings suddenly dimmed, the dawn light disappearing. This time, Hobert stole the Guardian's dawn light, which was equivalent to stripping away a state that benefited the Guardian. But Hobert would not use dawn light in combat, because that would be equivalent to creating a favorable environment for the enemy. Madness. Just as the Guardian's Dawn Sword was about to fall, Hobert used a new ability. The rationality in the Guardian's eyes quickly vanished, perfectly missing the target that was within reach. Although the madness Hobert used seemed risky, the actual risk was not great, because the Guardian was still in a weakened state. The key was that Dawn Light could block a large portion of extraordinary abilities for him, but now Dawn Light was gone, so Hobert succeeded with one strike. If the Guardian were within the dawn light, madness would not have much effect at all. The long whip in the hand of the schemer, who had also rushed close to Hobert, lashed out, covering the Guardian. Distortion. Hobert once again distorted the target of the long whip and said in a deep voice, "Underworld Gate." In the illusion, a bronze gate with mysterious patterns appeared. Unspeakable eyes looked out from the gate, causing the fear in the schemer's heart to flood like a tide. The battle took several twists and turns, and now it was again in Hobert's favor. From the moment the order would appeared, Hobert had been creating an order that could enhance the power of the underworld. The bodies of the mercenaries in the nearby camp began to twitch again, several times almost sitting back up. While the Guardian was in a state of madness, Hobert immediately used the psychic wine glass's ultimate move, Underworld Gate. The schemer was already stabbed by the Tang knife, and he had been suppressing the fear in his heart and the discomfort of his spirit body. But the moment the Underworld Gate appeared, the moment those indescribable eyes emerged, the schemer's inner fear and the Tang knife's injury suddenly erupted, making his body feel rusty, cold, and stiff. Immediately after, pale arms reached out from the Underworld Gate, pulling at the schemer, while human-like wails, difficult to produce, struck the schemer's soul, making him tremble uncontrollably. The schemer wanted to materialize flames to burn those pale arms, but his hands trembled so violently that the flames flowed out of his palms like water. Hobert took a step forward, ready to deliver a finishing blow, but the Guardian had already recovered some sanity from his state of madness. Almost reflexively, he used the Dawn sword to block the blow for the schemer. So Hobert twisted his blade, and with a single strike, he also pierced the Guardian's armor. He realized that the material of the Tang knife was of a very high sequence, and he estimated that even the demigod-level Dawn armor could be pierced with one strike, but the Guardian's Dawn bulwark was a different matter, requiring at least 3 strikes to break through. The Guardian was startled. In his memory, his armor had not suffered extensive damage for a very long time. The Underworld Gate rapidly amplified the Guardian's fear, and the Guardian involuntarily took a step back. At this point, his sanity had largely recovered, and as he recondensed his Dawn armor, he was surprised why an Underworld Gate had appeared before him. One of the schemer's arms had already been pulled into the bronze gate, and his palm finally formed crimson flames, but under the influence of the Underworld Gate, the crimson flames rapidly changed color, turning a ghastly green. Not only did it have no effect on the pale arms, but it was also burning the schemer's spirit body. Hobert prepared to deliver another finishing blow, feeling the rapid loss of his spirituality. Although the Underworld Gate was very effective, its spiritual consumption was also very high. The Guardian once again used the Dawn bulwark to block the blow for the schemer, and at the same time, used the Dawn bulwark to pin the schemer at the entrance, starting a spiritual tug-of-war with Hobert. Hobert's spirituality was certainly not as strong as the Sequence 5's, and coupled with the Sequence 7 state, which had recovered significantly after being affected by the uncontrolled stone, he was drawing his sword to assist. After a brief deliberation, Hobert abandoned the summoning of the Underworld Gate. The pale arms, the indescribable eyes, and the soul-piercing howls rapidly faded, becoming illusory, and soon disappeared. The schemer's face was pale, covered in cold sweat, and he collapsed to the ground. If it had only been the Underworld Gate, it wouldn't have caused such severe effects, but the Underworld Gate caused the Tang knife's injury to fully manifest, and the schemer had lost his combat ability. If his spirit body's injuries were not treated quickly, he might not see tomorrow's sun. At this moment, the Guardian's weakening state had eased, his Dawn sword gradually became more solid, and he delivered a heavy chop towards Hobert. The Sequence 7 on the other side, seeing the Guardian's offensive become sharp again, took out his revolver and fired 3 shots at Hobert's back. A new pincer attack formed. Unfortunately, this pincer attack was far less sharp than before, and Hobert completely ignored the bullets flying towards him. Distortion. The Guardian's heavy chop once again missed its target, and the bullets hitting Hobert's back only made him stumble. The Sequence 7 weapon master was slightly stunned, never expecting Hobert to be so versatile, even able to withstand bullets. Taking advantage of this opening, Hobert shouted towards the entrance of the tomb passage, "Now!" The battle situation was much better than Hobert had initially anticipated. Originally, his plan was for Austin and the other two to form the second echelon and open a second battlefield while he was being besieged, primarily by a Sequence 5. At that time, Hobert would use Flash, and Austin would use the teleportation statue, striving to severely injure a Sequence 6 with their combined efforts. However, the current situation was that one Sequence 6 had lost combat effectiveness, and two Sequence 8s were either dead or uncontrolled, greatly narrowing the numerical gap between the two sides. Not far from Hobert's battlefield, Pete suddenly appeared, holding an oil painting. Even in the dark night, the two enemies in front of Pete still saw the beautiful summer grassland, trees, and the figure at the end of the grassland. The two simultaneously exclaimed, "What a wonderful scenery!" Then, the sinister-looking monster with no neck or head appeared, successively casting curses on the two exclaiming individuals. The two almost simultaneously drew their knives and guns, preparing to commit suicide. Fortunately, they had a companion who was unaffected, a Sequence 6 undead mentor. With a wave of his hand, two undead appeared beside his suicidal companions, grabbing their hands that held the knives and guns. Bang bang bang. Pete, who had good marksmanship, fired 3 shots in a row, still taking down the Sequence 8 not far from him. Seeing that his curse had little effect, the monster raised its sharp claws and lunged at the Sequence 7 who was in a cursed state. The undead mentor was about to come over to help lift the curse, but a large fat man jumped out from the entrance of the tomb passage, Death. Austin, who had been itching for a fight, immediately used his most powerful ability. The undead mentor dared not be negligent and summoned an undead to block this unavoidable blow for him. Pete on the other side put down the oil painting and continuously fired shots to assist the monster, but the monster's curse was not very strong, and the Sequence 7 had already escaped the cursed state. Then he rolled awkwardly, dodging bullets and the monster's claws. At this time, Pete's companions appeared, 2 mercenaries and 1 monster, jointly attacking the Sequence 7. And the battle on the undead mentor's side was also not optimistic. Austin, holding the teleportation statue, used whip on the left and spirit piercing on the right, gaining a complete advantage. Just then, a cry of weakening suddenly came from the forest. The undead mentor's power was immediately weakening, and Roy, with bloodstains on him, appeared pale at the edge of the battlefield. The Guardian saw everything on that battlefield, and he had absolutely no idea that the situation had suddenly taken such a sharp turn. The Guardian looked at Hobert, who was still unharmed. What was most infuriating was that he had never seen such an effective distortion. It succeeded every time. His Dawn sword seemed to never be able to touch Hobert. Not only that, Hobert continuously used distortion to affect the Sequence 8 who had turned into a monster, causing the monster to constantly fight the weapon master, making them fight each other. After a brief consideration, the Guardian shouted, "Retreat." As he spoke, he thrust his sword, using the momentum to create distance from Hobert, then quickly went to pick up the schemer and prepare to leave. How could Hobert let him succeed? Madness. The Guardian grabbed the schemer and held him in front, and madness struck the schemer. The weapon master on the side also fired his gun, making the monster recoil. He seized the opportunity to disengage from the battle, ignoring everyone else, and ran away. On the other battlefield, a bulwark emitting dawn light appeared in front of the undead mentor and the Sequence 7, helping them also escape the fight. Hobert pursued, flashing in front of the Guardian, intending to kill the schemer, who was being used as a shield, with a single strike. However, as the blade descended, a layer of dawn bulwark appeared again in front of the schemer. Hobert felt a bit helpless. This was the Guardian, this was the dawn bulwark. Even a demigod-level frontal attack would find it difficult to break through this bulwark. Under the Guardian's cover, the undead mentor also conveniently picked up the extraordinary characteristic of the Sequence 8 Hobert had killed first. Austin's teleportation statue was blocked by the dawn bulwark every time it teleported, making it impossible to keep the enemies contained. So, several people essentially watched as the Guardian covered his teammates' retreat. The Guardian's choice was correct. Ever since the 8 of them were artificially divided into 2 battlefields by Hobert, the battle on Hobert's side had a significant advantage for them, as Hobert was almost completely suppressed by the Guardian, with hardly any power to fight back. However, the other battlefield was unfavorable for the Guardian and his team. It was already a 2-on-4 situation, with no advantage in either numbers or sequence. They still had a chance to retreat calmly now. If they waited a little longer, the undead mentor in sequence 7 on that side would not be able to hold on and would be taken out one after another. Then it would be their group besieging a sequence 5 and a sequence 7. The crucial point was that the Guardian was not confident he could quickly take down Hobert, otherwise the battle could have continued for a while longer. Hobert had originally wanted to use Flash, which was available again, to take down an enemy sequence 7, but he thought about it and gave up. The Guardian and his teammates had already left the range of the Order wood, and the Guardian's Dawn Light was about to recover. Hobert thought it would be too risky to pursue alone. In the blink of an eye, only a monster from the oil painting and the monster formed by the out-of-control sequence 8 remained on the battlefield. Hobert's blade flashed, first dispatching the out-of-control monster, then he walked towards the monster with sharp claws, still holding his blade. It seemed to have the memory of the previous monster, remembering being killed by Hobert not long ago. Upon seeing Hobert, the monster, which had been baring its fangs and claws just moments before, turned around and prepared to retreat back into the oil painting. Hobert charged, and with another strike, he dealt with the opponent. Austin and the others, whether from surviving a disaster or disbelieving the current outcome, all stood there, staring blankly at the wild grass that had just been set on fire by the schemer. It wasn't until Hobert gave Roy a healing art that everyone came back to their senses. Roy found his wounds healing rapidly. After thanking Hobert, he said, "Virgil is still in the grass over there, but he might already be gone." "Take me to see," Hobert said, "as long as he's not dead, there's a chance to save him." Austin also reacted, "Everyone, follow. We cannot separate before returning to Backland. If the Guardian and his team wanted to turn back and ambush them, they would definitely target isolated companions." While going to rescue the person, Roy recounted what had happened on the ground. Earlier, probably when Hobert killed the human skin wraith in the tomb, the camp was attacked by the undead mentor who had just escaped. Roy first warned his companions in the tomb and prepared to hold the camp, waiting to rendezvous with Austin and the others. However, the enemy's attack was too fierce, and the injured Roy and Virgil narrowly escaped. They ran for a distance and found that the enemy did not pursue them at all, seemingly having no intention of chasing them. They had already stayed here for over a week, and Roy was familiar with the surrounding terrain. They rested for a while in a secluded grassy area. Later, Roy saw the dawn light emitted from the camp. He carefully crept back and happened to encounter Austin jumping out of the cave, so he immediately joined the battle. Returning to the grassy area, Virgil was already dead, and his extraordinary characteristic had already precipitated. Everyone stood in silence before the body for more than half a minute, as if in mourning, and as if lamenting the fate of mercenaries. Finally, Austin collected Virgil's extraordinary characteristic, and the other team members carried Virgil's body back to the camp. Hobert said to Roy and the others, "To prevent accidents, Austin and I will stay at the camp. You all hurry and move the things out of the tomb." Because of Hobert's performance in the recent battle, they were very convinced by his words and immediately jumped down to move things. Around the out-of-control sequence 8, Hobert found a dark gray stone emitting a strong foul odor. This was the monster's extraordinary characteristic. To be precise, this should be a sealed artifact, because that sequence 8 had lost control. Although it still had the appearance of an extraordinary characteristic, it could no longer be used as a normal extraordinary characteristic. Austin brought over the extraordinary characteristic of the sequence 8 killed by Pete and handed it to Hobert. "This is your spoils of war. Even now, I feel like what we just experienced was a dream." Storms above, we actually managed to drive away a sequence 5 and his subordinates. Hobert did not stand on ceremony and put away the extraordinary characteristic. If it were a frontal confrontation, we would absolutely have no chance. The surprise attack of the teleportation statue gave us a huge advantage. It was also during that surprise attack that the groundwork was laid for one of the enemy's sequence 6 to lose combat effectiveness. If the enemy had maintained a lineup of 1 sequence 5 and 2 sequence 6s, then this battle would have been difficult to win. Austin smiled. No matter what, this is enough for me to brag about for a lifetime. As he spoke, he placed the bodies of his 2 subordinates together, then went to the tent to get a shovel, preparing to dig a pit on the spot to bury his companions' bodies. When he opened the tent, he discovered, oh, it's Lena's body. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.